Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I'd like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests or interests affecting impartiality and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome to everyone. Item 1 is the declaration of opening, and I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member. That's me. There's no such announcements this evening. Item 4 is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leave of absence, and Councillor Glenn Cridland does have an approved leave of absence for the period of 12 September 2024 to 13 October 2024 inclusive. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Bear with me because there's a few of them. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as I'm a former co-patron of the Wasp Hockey Club, and I've also attended a number of South Perth United Football Club events over the years. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as my sons attend Wesley College and have played for Wasp Hockey Club, and my husband is a Wesley College old boy and has also played and coached for Wasps Hockey Club in the past. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as myself and my family are members of Wasps Hockey Club. My involvement extends to numerous committee positions, one of those positions being president. I'm currently Minky coordinator. I was a guest at a dinner at Wesley College recently. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as my son attends Wesley College. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me again. I've declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in item 12.1 as some of the proposed listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as one of the nominated persons for the Local Heritage Survey Review is known to me as a neighbour. I was a guest at a dinner at Wesley College recently and my children attend Kensington Primary School. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as some of the heritage places listed in the draft Local Heritage Survey are known to me by past or present association, and some of the landowners, associates or residents of some of the heritage places listed in the draft Local Heritage Survey are or may also have been known to me. And Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as I know of someone who is not a closely associated person to me and their property is on the Heritage Survey. Does anyone else have any interest that they wish to declare this evening? Councillor Waugh.
Sorry, I'll also just add to that impartiality interest. My son attends Wesley College. That's it. Thank you.
And is that in item 12.1?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, folks, any other declarations? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay. All right, item 6 is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil for this evening. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. Before I open public question time, I note that we've got 13 sets of public questions tonight, which is a lot. And judging from past experience, it might take us an hour, maybe an hour and a half to get through all of them. So for this reason, I'm going to be strict about preambles tonight, and I'm asking everyone to keep their preambles to 1 or 2 sentences max. I understand that the city's governance team has been in touch with at least some of you, so hopefully this won't be too much of a problem. Sorry, my bad, it's 12 sets of written submissions, but what I said still goes. I'd like to start by inviting Ms Cecilia Brooke of South Perth, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors and all city staff. I speak on behalf of the City of South Perth Residents Association. I understand that Division 6 of the Local Government Act describes financial conflicts and how they affect elected members' participation in debates and decision of council. And the Public Sector Commission has provided a guide that applies to the entire WA public service. You will also find similar guides and expectations that apply to the public sector across the whole of Australia. The guide seeks to reflect the community expectation that public officers carry out their duties fairly and without bias, and the decisions that they make are not affected by personal interest. The Public Service Commission recognises that a poorly managed perceived conflict of interest, where a third party could form a view that personal interest could improperly influence the officer's decision, whether or not that is in fact the case, can be just as damaging as an actual conflict of interest. My question 1, does public sector expectations regarding the implications to participation in matters where a perceived conflict of interest exists apply to local government and elected members?
Thank you for the question. Mr Bradford.
Thanks for the question. The Public Sector Commission provides guidance for public sector employees, not for elected members. The Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries provides clear guidance to elected members in managing interest in matters before council. The expectation is that all elected members will follow that guidance.
Thank you. Question 2, what is the CEO's recommendation to elected members where perceived conflicts exist?
Yep. The CEO and the city's governance staff always advise elected members to follow the department, DLG, CI, their guidance. And that guidance is publicly available.
Thank you. Question 3, does the CEO believe that risks declared tonight present a material risk to the decision before council?
Thanks for the question. There are a number of risks to the city associated with the proposal, and these have been made clear in previous reports and also referred to in the current report. Some of those risks can be mitigated to an acceptable level, particularly in the short term. Others may be more difficult to address over the longer term.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Bradford, and thank you, Ms Brooke, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Mr Max Makura of Como. Welcome to you. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have a preamble, so right into it.
Thank you.
So my question 1 is to the CEO, Mr Bradford. Can the city explain the rationale for not charging commercial rates for the proposed lease of Collier Reserve to Wasp Hockey Club? This appears to be inconsistent with state government's desire to charge commercial rates for the use of state land.
Thank you. Mr Bradford.
Thanks for the question. The resolution of council made it clear that WASPs would be responsible for the construction costs of the facility and then all the repairs and maintenance of the constructed facility, inclusive of structural repairs. In most instances, where the city leases buildings to a sporting body, the city is responsible for structural repairs, and in these instances, a minimum rent is charged. For example, the total rent charged annually for the use of the WCG Thomas Pavilion at Richardson Park is around $4,500 a year. In the case of WASPs, given the significant capital contribution and the ongoing maintenance requirements, a lease fee of $1 is proposed. The state government will generally only request a commercial return where the land is being used for commercial purposes. WASPs will be required to pay for the use by senior terms of the playing services within the licensed area in accordance with the city's schedule of fees and charges.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I've actually had three, but I've scrubbed one of my questions. So question 3 is to the council. Can the council please clarify the rationale for further eroding the already limited amount of public open space being offered by offering an option to lease Collier Reserve to Wasp Hockey Club for a single-use sporting facility? It has been acknowledged at previous council meetings that South Perth open space is currently well below the recommended 10% in policy number DC 2.3 public open space in residential areas being a mere 2.9% availability.
I think the councillors will be debating that one fairly shortly, but in the meantime, I'll pass the question to Mr Bradford.
Thanks for the question. Council makes decisions on the use of public open space and other land, taking into account a whole range of factors, one of which is public open space, but I can't explain that decision any further than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bradford, and thank you, Mr McCura, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Dr Louise Johnston of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Last week I was going to talk about the environment, and this week I was also going to talk about the environment, but again, more important issues have come up, so I won't be able to share the information about these guys.
I do need you to get to the questions, Dr Johnson. I do have to be fair to everyone.
Of course you do. It has come to light that the Wasp Hockey Club drafted and shared several email templates with the Xavier Hockey Club located in the town of Victoria Park. These templates were then circulated to Xavier Club members through an email sent by the Xavier Club president suggesting that the club support the Wasp OTL project at Collier Reserve. The emails were specifically addressed to 5 councillors who voted in favour of the motion, as well as one councillor who was absent during the vote. Furthermore, members were encouraged to attend tonight's meeting, wear yellow and green, and to create the impression of strong public support or rent a crowd. One elected member reportedly received up to 100 emails raising concerns that councillors might be misled into perceiving strong support for the Wasps OLT. Question: given that Xavier Hockey are not party to the option to lease and are unlikely to be across the details, does the city view this attempt by Wasps to influence councillors by skewing the perceived support for their proposed facility at Collier Reserve as appropriate?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So the city only became aware of those emails late this afternoon. The city does not have a view on their appropriateness or otherwise, and emails from community members are just one of the things that elected members would take into account when forming their views on matters before council.
Thank you. Number 2, it has also come to light through Councillor Cridland's Facebook post dated September the 8th, 2021, that he assisted WASP in their distribution of letters outlining how the public could provide feedback through an online survey, which the city stated was conducted by a consultant on behalf of WASP and Wesley College and not the city. Can the city confirm whether Councillor Cridland has submitted an impartiality interest relating to his letterbox delivery of WASP consultation material at any point?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
So to the best of our knowledge, Councillor Cridland has declared an impartiality interest on all occasions that matters involving WASPs have appeared before council.
And my third question is, at the agenda meeting the 17th of September 2024, post-deputations, the city urged councillors not to rely on their own spreadsheet analysis to try to understand and compare the city's range of recreational facilities. Rather, instead, to seek the professional opinion and knowledge of the city in terms of utilisation and best practice for each sport in question. Can the city advise have or how many councillors have actually approached the city to better inform themselves since the agenda meeting?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So each Friday, councillors receive a bulletin receive a councillor bulletin, and last Friday there was a bulletin article prepared by the city providing information on topics discussed at the agenda briefing, and a number of councillors have since submitted further questions on this item, and answers have been provided by the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Dr Johnson, for the questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Soni Sind of South Perth. Welcome to you. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, all. My question is, if Collier Reserve is approved for Wasp and construction takes several years, how can the city and South Perth United Football Club work together to meet the club's immediate needs, since both are winter sports, hockey and soccer?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City would review reserves to determine whether there is an alternative location. However, there is a shortfall of sports spaces to meet growing demand. The City would also seek to facilitate discussions between the club and WASP to enable users of the reserve until such time the construction commences.
Thank you. Could the city clarify the planned upgrades at Richardson Park, when they will be completed, and if the funding will go to both Richardson Park and Collier?
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. So sports lighting and all gender change rooms upgrades are proposed at Richardson Park. Change room upgrades are proposed at Collier Reserve. However, if the option to lease is granted, the City would not continue with the works at Collier Reserve, given the proposed development of a new pavilion. In terms of the upgrades to Richardson Park, the City is in the process of preparing the tender for the sports light upgrades.
Thank you. Will there be room for 2 soccer pitches at Collier during the construction? I think that was...
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the proposed lease area extends over the southern pitch and a portion of the northern pitch.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Ms Sind, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Carolyn Burnett of Salter Point. Welcome to you. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. My questions, they all relate to the motion of OTL for WASP at Collier Reserve. I don't really have a preamble, so I'll just get straight into it. The City noted its significant financial concerns regarding the WASP proposed facility. The lease agreement offers no security in the form of bank guarantee nor retention monies, as would normally occur in a construction contract, which would offer protection to the lessor, in this case the City, should WASP default on their obligations during construction. Furthermore, it appears the lessor has no protection against long-term operating and maintenance costs, which WASP may not be able to cover for the approximately $15 million facility. Could the City advise how they could recoup costs incurred should WASP be unable to fulfil their obligations during construction and beyond practical completion?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the option to lease contains conditions precedent at clause 5.1. Only when the conditions precedent are met will the club be able to enter into the lease. One of the conditions precedent is 5.1a, where the grantee demonstrating to the grantor's reasonable satisfaction that the grantee has secured funding for the development. Should the City be required to fund construction or future maintenance, the use of municipal funds would be required, as grant funding is not typically available for this purpose.
Thank you. At the agenda meeting last week, the City advised that Hockey WA had confirmed clubs playing home games at Curtin's upgraded Perth Hockey Stadium are to be given primary access to night training for seniors and juniors, access to meeting rooms and function rooms at no cost, capacity to conduct summer hockey programs for juniors using free turf hire, no outgoings such as lease and licensing fees, staff and operational costs, no utility charges or cleaning costs, no repairs or maintenance costs, reduce hire fees, offer of club signage, access to scoreboards, including messaging for club-specific messaging. Hockey WA will consider ability for revenue sharing, and permanent display of memorabilia is also a possibility. Does the City believe this Hockey WA information provides the best outcome for WASPs, the City, and its 46,000 plus residents?
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. Yes, the city maintains that WASP should continue to liaise with Hockey WA to determine how its needs can best be met at the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre.
Thank you. My final question. The motion for option to lease referenced Hockey WA's Strategic Plan 2021 to 26. Item 47 of the motion asserted Hockey WA does not represent itself as providing facilities for local clubs. This assertion is upended with the new Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 33. Their first priority now is to provide world-class hockey facilities at Curtin using the committed $135 million from the state government and accommodate nearby hockey clubs. Priority 1 rationale states, secures ongoing international venue status for PHS and retains the HAHPP, provides a home venue for 3 to 5 centrally located clubs, alleviates pressure to find suitable land for turf development in the central metropolitan area. Wasps is specifically named as a club to be accommodated. Does the city agree that this explicitly stated first priority of the Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 2033 supports their recommendation to not grant WASP the OTL at Collier Reserve?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Shaw, and thank you very much for the questions. All right. I note that we've just gone over 15 minutes, so I'm going to use my powers to extend public question time for a further 15 minutes. I would now like to invite Mr Jeremy Lowe of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
My questions relate to the saturation of turf in the area. A planning application is currently under review by the City for Aquinas College to build a new hockey clubhouse and other school upgrades, with construction likely to begin early next year if approved. The Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan also notes the potential for additional turfs at Aquinas College in the City of South Perth, potentially a multi-purpose surface. It seems Aquinas is preparing to expand its turf offerings. Additionally, Como Secondary College has a proposed hockey turf included in their master plan. My first question, what is the minimum recommended population size for the provision of a hockey turf, and how can an oversupply of turfs impact the viability of these facilities?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The development application for Aquinas College included proposed replacement of the hockey pavilion and the tennis courts. The recommended catchment ratio is 1 turf for every 75,000 residents. Viability is dependent on the number of players. If there is not a significant increase in the number of players, it may impact the viability of the synthetic turfs.
Thank you. Can the City explain how it plans to liaise with all schools in the City of South Perth to implement a multi-government strategy of the shared facilities most effectively?
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. The City liaised with Como Secondary College ahead of the 27th of February 2024 report on a previous report on co-located hockey facilities within the City, as it facilitates a specialist hockey academy, and the City had no other plans to liaise with other schools in the district.
Third question, the Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 33 states that the ideal scenario in the metropolitan area is to establish a series of well-distributed hockey clubs, each with a geographical brand. Given that the approving of the Wasps turf could potentially increase the total of 8 turfs in close proximity, with 3 at schools within the city and 4 at the High Performance Centre in Curtin, does the City believe that leasing Collier Reserve to Wasp would help achieve this recommendation?
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, the City maintains that WASP should continue to liaise with Hockey WA to determine how its needs can best be met at the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Lowe, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Christy Lowe of Como. Welcome to you. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. So, if WASP option to lease is approved, the club would have a 3-year period to secure funding and obtain the necessary approvals to exercise the lease. My questions concern the potential limitations this may impose on the city and the community regarding the planning and the use of green space. So my first question, how might approving the option to lease impact the city's ability to consider or plan for urban greening improvements at Collier Reserve? Specifically, can these improvements still be implemented during the 3-year period?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The information released as part of the stakeholder engagement process for the urban greening strategy highlights the benefits of urban greening by improving the livability of the urban environment. This includes environmental, social, psychological, recreational and economic benefits for our community and reducing the heat island effect. The type of project that could happen at Collier Reserve that would contribute to the urban greening would be similar to the recent plantings at Belgraden Reserve. The proposed lease at Collier Reserve would limit or eliminate the ability to implement such a project both during construction and permanently.
Yep, thank you. Okay, Director Adams indicated that if the lease option proceeds, the active space can still be licensed and booked for sports activities. Can the city please advise if this will still apply during the construction period, and if so, how much of the oval would be accessible for use by existing sport clubs and the community?
Thank you. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The laydown area required during construction has not yet been determined, so we're unable to say how much of the area would be available at this stage.
Okay. And my last question. The city has confirmed that no specific environmental study has been conducted on the proposed hockey development, including the impact on black cockatoos, which roost on adjacent land at Collier Park Golf Course, or the potential heat island effects of the turf and surrounding facilities. The only environmental requirement is the tree management plan that WASP must submit. Will a tree management plan have the scope to address all environmental considerations and requirements of this proposal?
Thank you. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, there is a requirement in the lease for the WASPs to comply with any future environmental management plans of the city.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Ms Lowe, for the questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr Michael Nind of Cloverdale. Welcome to you. If you'd like to come to the microphone, we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors. My name's Michael Nind. In case you want to remember that, should we be back here again? As the city may be aware, Hockey WA recently released its Strategic Facilities Plan 2023-33. The executive summary states, hockey participation levels in WA have remained relatively constant over the past 5 years, despite the state's population growing by more than 6% in that period. Meanwhile, the number of synthetic turf installations in the metropolitan area has increased by 40%. This growth has now effectively saturated the market, and further turf development could now jeopardise the viability of existing installations, particularly in the metropolitan area. Question 1. Given that 4 turfs at the Curtin High Performance Hockey Centre would be located less than 1 kilometre from the proposed WASP turf at Collier Reserve, can the city comment on the potential financial risks this oversaturation may pose to the viability of the WASP turf and consequently to the city?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Building a high-cost, single-user asset on Crown land vested in the city presents long-term financial risk for the club and the city, should the club be unable to generate sufficient funds to maintain the turf.
Thanks. The Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan identifies a home venue for 3 to 5 centrally located clubs, including WASP, Victoria Park Xavier and Curtin University, as a top priority to alleviate the pressure of finding suitable land for turf development in the central metropolitan area. Can the city confirm whether this information supports its recommendation not to grant the option to lease at Collier Reserve to WASPs?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Question 3. WASP have indicated that securing state funding through the Community Sporting and Recreation Facilities Fund is unlikely due to the PHS upgrade. The City has also informed us that the state government will assess the current provision of turfs, especially with our $135 million commitment to the nearby Perth Hockey Stadium at Curtin. As a result, the state is unlikely to fund a duplicate project in such close proximity. The Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan identifies 6 priority projects over the next 10 years. Can the City confirm whether the Wasp Hockey facility in the City of South Perth is one of those 6 priorities?
Thank you. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The proposed facility at Collier Reserve is not one of the 6 priorities. Development of additional turfs at the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre is a priority.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Nine, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Ms Kay Poe of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Okay, good evening. At last week's meeting, Director Shaw highlighted the challenges of creating new public open spaces. She explained that while the city can acquire freehold land and market value to address the district's shortfall, this is particularly difficult in an inner city context and would likely be cost prohibitive. Recent residential land sales in Como show an average price of about $1,500 per square metre, suggesting that the market value of 12,000 square metre of land could be around $18 million. While acknowledging that this market estimate is only approximate, would it be reasonable to conclude that it would be unfeasible for the city to acquire a similar sized parcel of land in Como to offset the loss of accessible space at Collier Reserve?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
Yes, there appear to be limited financially feasible opportunities for the city to acquire large areas of open space within the city.
Thank you. The option to lease states that WASP would only pay $1 per year in rent, which is inconsistent with Section 2.1.5 of the DFS. The DFS projects a 10-year hockey facility model that suggests that WASP and Wesley College would pay a lease of $20,000 per annum for the first year, and this would increase by 3.5% annually thereafter. However, under Councillor Waugh's option to lease motion, Wesley College is not listed as a lessee. Therefore, this private school, which doesn't pay rates, would benefit from the exclusive use of the city's public land at no cost. Why was the $1 rent applied for the lease? And does the city consider excluding Wesley College from the lease to be best practice?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So the lease has been negotiated with Wesley South Perth Hockey Club as per the council resolution. There doesn't appear to be any need to include Wesley College, given the purpose is for the operations of Wesley South Perth Hockey Club. The question regarding rent has previously been answered by the CEO.
Right. Representatives from 5 community groups, including the City of South Perth Residents Association, Salter Point Community Group, South Perth Tree Canopy Advocates, South Perth United Football Club, and Friends of Collier Reserve, have all voiced their opposition to the Wasp Hockey development, which serves to benefit only one sports group and one private school. Does the Mayor and the City believe this collective community opposition further supports a recommendation not to grant the option to lease at Collier Reserve to Wasp?
Again, I think the councillors will be debating that question amongst others fairly shortly, but for the time being, I'll send that to Mr Adams.
Yeah, so the city's recommendation is consistent with previous recommendations to council and reflects the professional opinion of staff.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Ms Poe, for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Joanne Ord. Folks, just a gentle reminder that under the standing orders, no clapping, no booing. We just listen to what people have got to say. So hopefully I won't have to say that again. Welcome to you, Ms Ord.
Thank you.
Microphone is yours.
So
We look forward to your questions.
So I might confuse myself, so bear with me. So, number one, as a ratepayer, it concerns me that city funds were allocated to the hockey DFS, yet the city had no involvement in its production to ensure an objective and balanced approach. Community members have raised concerns previously about the way the consultation process was carried out, and review of the DFS has raised concern over quality of content, particularly with regards to the CapEx estimate, lack of funding detail and the absence of a business case. Further quality concerns were also raised over the inclusion of profound statements such as people prefer to park on verges and stuff than walk. I'm aware the DFS is an inherited issue for the current administration, but can the city please advise for the benefit of its residents and the current council if the approach to co-funding studies of this nature would be recommended again?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So the funding for the DFS for WASP was a decision of council in November 2020. The city will recommend approaches to feasibility studies depending on the individual circumstances that apply each time. But generally, where a facility is to be considered on land controlled by the city would control and fund the feasibility study.
Good, thank you. Number two, clause 5.1b of the option to lease states the grantee demonstrating to the grantor's reasonable satisfaction that the grantee has secured funding for the development. And for the benefit of residents, could the city please expand on this by explaining the level of funding detail to be provided by WASP in order to satisfy the city under this clause?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
So the city would have to be certain that WASP have sufficient funding to complete the construction of the planned facility, which would require detailed costings and evidence that funding is guaranteed. This would normally include detailed plans, a report from a qualified quantity surveyor, signed grant funding agreements, bank statements, financial statements, etc.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And Ms Orr, just before you proceed with your third question, the latest tranche of 15 minutes has expired, so I will move a motion that public question time be extended for a further 15 minutes, seconded by Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that we extend public question time for a further 15 minutes. And that was unanimous. Thank you all, and please continue, Ms Ord.
Number three, a deputation last week eloquently conveyed community concern over impartiality, optics and council integrity regarding this option to lease if strong associations cloud councillors' ability to separate themselves from the facts at hand. Two councillors here tonight, I'm advised, attended the WASP funding meeting on the 26th of May recently. Can the city advise whether attendance at such an occasion demonstrates an arm's length approach, is best practice, ensures transparency and maintains council's integrity, which in turn reflects on the city?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So to our knowledge, all elected members have declared impartiality interests in accordance with DLGCI guidelines.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Ms Ord, for the questions.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mr Murray Rosenberg of Como, if you'd like to come to the microphone. Welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors and staff. I support the City of South Perth Administrator's report to the council that the option to lease Collie Reserve to the Wasp Hockey Club does not proceed for the reasons outlined in their report. If this were to go ahead, a significant community asset would be lost to many other sporting groups and the community that use this area, and will incur significant future financial risk upon the city. Question 1. How is progressing a proposal to possibly allow a synthetic turf at Collie Reserve, a public open space, consistent with the City of South Perth's proposed urban greening strategy?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So the urban greening strategy is still in the public engagement stage, therefore priorities and objectives for the strategy are as yet unconfirmed. However, the proposed development at Collier Reserve would likely reduce the options to enhance urban greening.
Question 2. At the council meeting on the 23rd of the 6th, 23, at item 10.1.1, which discussed a motion on whether to allow Wasp Hockey Club to build a synthetic turf at Colliery Reserve, the Mayor, Greg Milner, excused himself from this discussion as he was the co-patron of Wasps. How then is Councillor Prendeville allowed to participate in this discussion at item 10.1.1 when she has declared that she is a member of Wasps, involved in various committees, including that as past president, and she is the current Mickey coordinator of Wasps?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So as per the city's previous responses in relation to impartiality interests, there's no requirement for elected members to leave the room. DLGCI guidelines require elected members to declare an impartiality interest and to vote on the matter.
If the members of other sporting groups such as the South Perth United Football Club can travel to various sites away from their home ground to play their sport, is it the city's view that it would be reasonable to expect Wasps to do the same?
Thank you for the question. Mr Adams.
So there are numerous sporting clubs in the metropolitan area that are required to travel to more than one location to play their home games.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Mr Rosenberg, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Mr Barry Drake of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
My name is Barry Drake. I live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, officers, good evening, members of the gallery and everybody listening on YouTube. The preamble to my questions is very simple, straightforward. They are designed to alert the public of Western Australia to the fact that the City of South Perth is trying to exclude use of Sir James Mitchell Park.
Mr Drake, we've been through this. Mr Drake, I'm speaking. Don't try and speak over the top of me. Not appreciated. We've been through this a great many times previously. Public question time is for questions, not for statements, not for deputations with a question mark on the end. Please proceed to your questions.
Question number 1. This is about Sir James Mitchell Park, not...
I gathered. Ask the question, please.
If another school other than Wesley College asked the City of South Perth Council to have their sporting fields on Sir James Mitchell Park, would the city spend $50,000 of ratepayers' money on a feasibility study?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The May 2015 South Perth Foreshore Management Strategy recommends that Elm Street be developed as a high-quality junior sports, events and recreation area. The City will be undertaking the actions for this node, including investigating the demand and opportunities for junior sport and geotechnical investigations. The City was therefore always intending to undertake this body of work, regardless of Wesley College indicating they would seek use of the space should the site be developed for this purpose.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your second question, Mr Drake?
Well, the answer to my question last month
Mr Drake,
was because
again,
Wesley asked the question.
Mr Drake, I
Nobody
will
else.
turn off your microphone if you don't obey the rules like everyone else. Please ask your second question.
Question number 2. How many councillors declared an interest when the request for Wesley College to have sporting fields on Sir James Mitchell Park was voted on and they resolved to spend the $50,000?
Thank you for the question.
On a study.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So declarations are contained within the minutes. Council resolved to fund the entire $50,000 towards the study and did not accept Wesley College's proposal to contribute 50% towards the study.
So Wesley
Thank
got
you.
away without spending any money. Very
Mr.
good.
Drake.
Right, question number 3. When a council declares an impartiality interest, who decides if the interest is a financial one or not?
Thank you for the question. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is the responsibility of the individual elected member to disclose an interest. The Local Government Act 1995 defines the type of interest, including financial and proximity interests. There is a publicly available Department of Local Government Sport and Cultural Industries guideline that provides clarification on the declaration of interest.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw, and thank you, Mr. Drake, for the questions. Mr. Drake, your time is done. Please resume your seat. I'm now going to check with the governance team to see if there's any questions in the tray that have been received late. That's a no. Okay. In that case, I now close public question time at 6:45 p.m. All right. That brings us to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 27 August 2024. So I'm about to seek a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 27 August 2024 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved by Councillor Coveney, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No? Okay, then I declare the minutes carried unanimously. Item 7.2 is notes of briefing. I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to move that council notes that the following council briefings and workshops were held. Item 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops. Item 7.2.2, council agenda briefings, 17 September 2024. Can I, Councillor Coveney, thank you. Anyone to Councillor Prendeville for seconding? Thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Okay, then I declare that carried unanimously. Item 8 is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions, which is nil for this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil for this evening. Item 8.3 is deputations, and deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held on 17 September 2024. That brings us to item 9 of the agenda, which is the method of dealing with agenda business. I'll now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the September council agenda briefing.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. All reports were discussed at the September council agenda briefing, noting that the Community Recreation Facilities Plan report has been removed from the ordinary council agenda to allow for a third council briefing to be held on that topic. I would also note that for item 10.3.2 on tonight's agenda, the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations of 2015 were amended and took effect on the 19th of September. The change one of the changes that introduces is change of terminology that introduces unhosted short-term rental accommodation as a land use in the deemed provisions in place of holiday accommodation. The City will be preparing a scheme amendment to reflect changes in terminology that will be presented to Council soon. And in relation to item 10.3.2, where holiday accommodation is used, the term unhosted short-term rental accommodation will be substituted by the City.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean that the officer recommendation will be adopted as is without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. That's item 10.1.1, response to notice of motion, Sports Spaces Collier Reserve, option to lease, Wasp Hockey Club. The reason for that is there's both an officer recommendation and an alternate officer recommendation for consideration. Item 10.4.2 has also been withdrawn. That's monthly financial statements for August 2024 and carry forward budget adjustments. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required for paragraph 2 of the officer recommendation, and item 10.5.4, entitled Policy Review, has also been withdrawn. The reason for that is Councillor Mary Choi has an alternative motion. Councillors, does anyone wish to withdraw any other items for discussion this evening? That's a no? Okay. In that case, I'm going to call for a mover and a seconder shortly to carry the following items by exception resolution. Bear with me. Item 10.1.2, entitled RFT 4 of 2024, replacement of concrete slab footpath with in situ concrete. Item 10.3.1, entitled Draft Karrawara Pedestrian and Cycle Access Plan. Item 10.3.2, proposed change of use, multiple dwelling to holiday accommodation, Lot 6, Number 6, 281 Mill Point Road, South Perth. Item 10.3.3, Draft Local Planning Policy, Waste Management, Advertising. Item 10.4.2, Listing of Payments, August 2024. Item 10.5.1, Internal Audit, Review of the Internal Audit Log. Item 10.5.2, Quarterly Activity Report. Item 10.5.3, Audit Register Progress Report, 4th Quarter Update, including External Audit Interim Report. And item 15.1.1, Execution of Payments Direction Deed and adoption of the revised charter for the operations of the Rivers Regional Subsidy. Could I, Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I think there was a mistake in item 10.4.2 because that needs the absolute majority, but you included that as part of en bloc voting. It should have been 4.1.
Ah, okay. Thank you for the pickup. So, it's 10.4.1 that's going through en bloc, and it's 10.4.2 that's been removed because it needs an absolute majority. Thank you for the pickup. Okay. Is everyone with that? All right, great. So with 10.4.1 being the one that's going through en bloc, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, does anyone oppose any of the items intended to go through en bloc this evening? No. Okay, then I'll declare that carried unanimously. So those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by Council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion, the first of which is item 10.1.1, response to notice of motion, Sports Spaces Collier Reserve, option to lease, Wasps Hockey Club. There's an officer recommendation and an alternate officer recommendation. Would someone like to move either of those? And Councillor Waugh, and please tell us which one you're moving.
Sorry, I'd like to move a motion to defer this item.
All right, you're entitled to give your reason as to why you'd like to do that.
Should I have it second first?
All right, well, does anyone wish to? Councillor Coveney is seconding a motion to defer. Councillor Waugh, you get to specify your reasons, but otherwise there's no debate on the motion.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I am moving to defer this item for 2 months to be brought back in November of 2024. Over the last few weeks, we've all heard from so many people in our community, and we have received emails, deputations and information from the administration. And this is clearly a matter of great importance and requires proper consideration by Council. It is clear that whatever decision is made on this, it will impact many people within our community. So my reasons for deferral. First, Council would benefit from a presentation from Hockey WA. I note that there was one scheduled 2 weeks ago and that was cancelled. We also heard from Wasps last week, and what they said was very different to the position that we heard from the City Administration. And I think it is imperative that Council are properly informed from Hockey WA itself so as to properly understand the offering there and its position with respect to WASPs, and accordingly, it is appropriate that we receive this presentation. My second reason is that, in my view, the City would benefit from an opportunity to obtain and consider independent legal advice concerning the Office's recommendation before us and the functions of the CEO under Section 5.41 of the Local Government Act. At present, I am uncomfortable with what Council are being asked to consider, and it is my view that it is contrary to Clause 16 of our Standing Orders Local Law, Regulation 10 of the Local Government Administration and Regulations, and my view is that considering this matter may cause this Council to fall into error. I believe the process that we are being asked to engage in is contrary to the standing orders of the City of South Perth and the requirements of the Local Government Administration Regulations. The consequences of this could be significant, and I am concerned that proceeding at this time could have the result that the City could open itself up to legal consequences, including Supreme Court litigation. And third, it is clear to me that councillors require additional time to consider the terms of the option and the lease. These are two very carefully drafted documents by an excellent law firm, and the Office's recommendation has failed to properly engage with the terms of the lease and provide advice on those terms, as one would expect. Rather, we have been presented with information regarding negotiations and the City's view as to the High Performance Hockey Centre. With respect, the Officer's report ought to have been focused on the terms of the option and the lease, and considering this matter in the absence of proper recommendations on the outcome of the motion is concerning. So in this regard, I consider it is only appropriate that the councillors be afforded a proper opportunity to consider these documents in detail and obtain their own independent advice if necessary, and for the City to reconsider its recommendation consistent with the outcome of the Council resolution in February to negotiate an option to lease. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillors, there's no debate on a motion to defer. I'm simply going to put the proposal that we defer this item for 2 months. Councillor Choi, a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Am I able to ask a question?
I don't think so, but I'll check with Mr Adams. Ask a question? No, far away.
Okay, thank you for that. Look, I believe the City received certain undertakings and a commitment by Hockey WA for the Wasp Hockey Club, as outlined by the CEO Bradford at last week's Council agenda briefing, and that all elected members have been provided that correspondence in writing. Is that correct?
Mr Bradford?
So the City has had a number of conversations with Hockey WA, and they are reflected in the reports that have been provided and the emails that we've provided to elected members. The exact specific provisions of what will be offered to clubs is still a subject of discussion between Hockey WA, the state government, and Venues West and the clubs, and so there will be changes and things to it. But what you've been provided reflects the current status of what Hockey WA have told us would be offered, and the briefing that we were seeking to provide was to, and I wrote the email to Hockey WA requesting it, to cover the same material that was presented to clubs and the City earlier this year, so that councils had the opportunity to hear it from directly from Hockey WA. I don't expect anything new to be introduced to that briefing.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I have a question.
Far away.
Thank you. So if this item was to be deferred for a couple of months, would the administration be able to indicate whether they feel that more information, new information or better information might come to hand that might assist us with decision making, given that we are aware of the $135 million offer and we're aware of the WASP position with regard to this option?
Mr Bradford?
I don't expect any particular new information to become available in the next 2 months, noting that I think in the February report we said the discussions between Hockey WA, Venues West, the government and the clubs are going to take 6 to 12 months to flesh out what will happen. Of course, that duration is still going, and so things will continue to evolve to the extent that the clubs are negotiating with Hockey WA, but I don't expect anything material to change.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. I guess I'll ask one question myself, and I wasn't prepared for this. Counts without breaching any legal professional privilege or compromising any legal professional privilege that might exist, does the City have any idea what Councillor Waugh is referring to in terms of the legal problems she alluded to? I guess that's to Mr Adams.
No, we haven't been provided with any advance notice, so I'm unsure of what exactly Councillor Ward's referring to.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just following on from your question, again, without wanting to compromise the city's legal position, is the city able to advise whether it's received any legal advice to date on the lease proposal or this item or motion?
Mr Adams.
So the advice that we've had relates to the preparation of the lease and the option to lease documents. So I haven't sought any legal advice outside of that. It's normal for us when we prepare leases to have them done by a legal firm, and that's the way that this lease and option to lease was prepared.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Mr Bradford.
Just to be clear, the lease was prepared by lawyers and their advice is encapsulated in the drafting of the terms that they said was appropriate for the lease, and involved several conversations and emails backwards and forwards between the administration and lawyers where we questioned things or they inserted things. And then when after WASPs were given the opportunity to provide feedback, there was further consideration of what WASP required and changes were made. That was all done with on advice by the lawyers who drafted the lease.
And I guess Councillor Brenda Brandis, another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Question again with regard to the process. So my understanding is that the presentation of this item tonight before us followed due process and followed what was actually requested of the administration, and the inclusion of the recommendation by the city is appropriate with regard to putting up a motion. Could I have that confirmed, please?
Mr Adams.
So as far as I'm concerned, we carried out everything that was required of us from the notice of motion, which included bringing it back to council for a decision, which is the way that we presented it in a report with a recommendation. And in fact, there's two recommendations. I don't believe that the recommendation, the officer's recommendation, changes anything in terms of what was required to be carried out under the previous resolution. We've done everything that was required.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And I guess one more question from me, building on Councillor Brenda Brandis's previous question. Is there any reason why councillors shouldn't be able to vote on this item and make a decision tonight?
In my view, no.
All right. Any further Councillor Waugh?
Can the administration please advise what clause 16.1 of the standing orders states?
It deals with revoking a decision.
And the effect of passing the officer's recommendation tonight will be on the February 2024 motion?
Mr Adams, I think I know what the answer to this one is, but I'll be guided by the administration.
So as we said last week, we're not revoking a decision of council because we've carried out everything that was required of us under what council asked us to do with that decision. So I'm not sure how you would argue that we're attempting to revoke a decision because everything to do with that decision has been carried out.
I'm inclined to agree, Councillor Waugh. All right. Okay, no applause, folks. I've got to be fair to everyone. All right. Any further questions on the proposed deferral, councillors? All right. Then I'm simply going to put Councillor Waugh's motion that we defer this item for 2 months to the vote. And I'm waiting on one more vote. Hopefully it's not me. No. All right, so the motion for deferral is tied 4 votes to 4. That means that I have a casting vote that I'm going to cast, and I cast against the deferral. I believe we should resolve this matter tonight. For the benefit of those listening via YouTube or in the gallery, those who voted in favour of the deferral were Councillor Navard, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Waugh and Councillor Coveney. Those against were myself, Mayor Milner, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor D'Souza and Councillor Choi. Yes, I think I got that right, didn't I? Thank you. All right, so we have an officer recommendation before us on item 10.1.1. We also have an alternate officer recommendation before us. Would someone like to move either of those items? And if so, would they like to say which of the two that they're moving? Councillor Waugh, and perhaps you can tell us which one you're moving, please.
Sure, I'll move the alternate recommendation then.
All right. Does anyone wish to second the alternate officer recommendation? That's Councillor Coveney. Councillor Waugh, the floor is yours.
Thank you. In February, this council debated and adopted the motion to proceed with the grant of an option to lease. The terms needed to be negotiated to fulfil the long-standing strategic direction of the City of South Perth. The land at Collier Reserve is designated as a sports space for playing fields and ovals, and that the City of South Perth has, for an extended period, supported the relocation of Wasps to this site since at least 2012, and in particular in its meetings of March 2013, March 2019, July 2019, November of 2020 and July of 2023. Furthermore, this is consistent with the City's adopted plans, including the Community Recreation Facilities Plan 2019 to 2033 and the Strategic Community Plan 2021 to 2031. These plans identified the need for additional sports infrastructure, particularly synthetic hockey fields, to address gaps in playable sports spaces within the district. The High Performance Hockey Centre has been there since 1984. It regularly undergoes upgrades and right now is no different. Over the last 15 years, it is clear that Collier Reserve has consistently been identified as the most suitable location for a synthetic hockey turf, grass fields and club rooms. This was a key recommendation in the Community Facilities Plan in 2019 to 2033, adopted by Council on the 25th of June 2019. But we discussed all of this in February. Right now, we are presented with an option and a lease that we are asked to consider. Regrettably, we do not have an officer's report that substantially deals with the terms of the option and the lease upon which this decision is to be made. So each councillor has been left to their own devices in how to understand this recommendation. I think I have a better chance than most because as a lawyer I deal with these leases from time to time. However, in the absence of a report on the terms, I have reviewed the draft option and lease and provide you with my summary. In my view, the lease and the option are drafted by a top-tier law firm with a wealth of experience and are heavily weighted in favour of the City. So my comments are as follows. In respect to the option that is only open for a period of 3 years, the Wasps are required to meet these criteria as condition precedent to exercising the option. A, obtaining approval for any future development from the City. B, demonstrating to the City's satisfaction that they have secured funding for any future development. C, the City approving in its sole discretion a tree management plan prepared by the Wasps for any future development. D, the City approving in its sole discretion any future premises plan, licensed area plan and laydown area plan. E, Wasps demonstrating to the satisfaction of the City that it has negotiated in good faith with other users for an in-principle agreement for the grant of a sublease or licence for a minimum sized area, determined by the City and able to be sublet at peppercorn rent. And F, obtaining consent from the Minister for Lands for the lease as required by the Land Administration Act. In respect to the lease, Wasps is required to obtain funding to the satisfaction of the City. Wasps is required to repair and maintain the property and rectify any and all defects. The City has no obligation to do or pay for anything. Wasps accepts all liability for the risks and the works and is required to take out and maintain insurance as stipulated by the City. Upon termination, the lessee is required to remove and make good all improvements to the premises unless requested by the City for them to remain. There is provision for a bank guarantee contained within the lease at clause 15. However, the amount of the guarantee is unclear, and it appears to me that this may still be in negotiation. Put simply, the terms of this lease are so heavily in favour of the city that I am surprised that the WASP lawyer would recommend that they enter into it. However, WASPs are what I would classify as sophisticated clients who are legally represented and capable of understanding the terms of the lease and option, and have indicated that they are willing to enter into it. So in terms of risk to the city, I would dare to say that there is zero risk to the city in entering into these documents. The condition precedents are so substantial that, in my view, all risk has been mitigated, and not surprisingly, because this was the carefully considered resolution of the February 2024 meeting. However, my biggest concern is that good governance requires consistency of approach. Not only has this matter been consistently supported by this council in its meetings of March 2013, March 2019, July 2019, November 2020 and July 2023. Furthermore, it has been adopted into the city's strategic plans, and most alarmingly from a governance perspective, it is proposed that we deal with the WASPs on significantly different terms to every other club in this city. In fact, the only inconsistent decision was in June of 2023. Tonight, this council must deal with the terms of the option and the lease on its merits. Nothing more and nothing less. I caution that consideration of irrelevant factors...
Councillor Ward, that's 5 minutes, but I'll move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, please vote on a motion that Councillor Ward be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. I'm waiting on one more vote. That was unanimous. Please continue, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Tonight, this council must deal with the terms of the option and its lease on its merits. Nothing more, nothing less. I caution that consideration of irrelevant factors may cause the council to fall into error. The question of granting the option and the lease was discussed and decided in February. The only relevant considerations are the terms within the documents themselves. Last week, we had many deputations, and over the last few weeks, I have received hundreds of emails, and I have carefully considered each concern raised with me. I apologise I have not been able to respond to each. I am aware of my obligations, and I do not have any material interest in the outcome of this item. I have read all of the documents provided to us.
Folks, please be fair. Councillor Ward is speaking. I want to listen to what she has to say. I'm sure the other councillors do as well. Please, let's be respectful and listen to the speaker. Apologies, Councillor Ward. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have read all of the documents that have been provided to us, and I have also read the historical meeting minutes and the entirety of the feasibility study, not just the officer's report. In the deputations and council questions, I do want to address a few matters raised. First, I note that there were some suggestions of costs of a possible future development, and to that I can say at present we do not have any development application in front of us. To that end, we do not know what any future development might look like or what it might cost. It would be improper of us to consider these matters as they are not before us, and we do not have any information of what a future development might be upon which we could make a proper informed decision on. Second, financial risk. The option and lease before us again are not development applications. They present no financial risk to the city. They are merely the allocation of space. Third, wildlife. Black cockatoos. The option and lease will not impact on bird life. This may become a very proper consideration of a future development application. Fourth, the High Performance Hockey Centre. The option to lease is able to operate side by side with WASP's negotiations for the High Performance Hockey Centre. Indeed, this was the very reason for the option rather than the lease, and it was the reason for providing 3 years, so those negotiations can be fully explored. I trust that the WASPs will continue to do so. 5, tree loss. Again, the option to lease does not affect trees on Collier Reserve. This will be a relevant consideration for any future development application. No tree will be permitted to be damaged by virtue of the option to lease. 6, exclusivity. The option to lease is to WASPs. WASPs, as I understand it, is open to any person who wishes to become a member and welcomes all persons as visitors. It is not exclusive, it is a community club. Furthermore, the condition precedent requires WASP to engage with another community group to allow it to use the facility at peppercorn rent. 7, Wesley College. Wesley are not a party to this arrangement. Any future funding arrangement between Wesley College and WASPs ought to be dealt with at the appropriate time. And 8, Como Secondary potential future turf. I am aware that Como Secondary College was built in 1969 and has had little to no funding since then. I am aware that it is a hockey specialist school and has had plans for a turf over an extended period. But the vagaries of any future redevelopment of the school are presently speculative and do not impact on the option and the lease. And finally, traffic, parking and amenity considerations. These are all proper considerations for assessment of any future development application. We cannot use these in our decision making tonight because we do not have any proper information in front of us about this. At present, the option to lease does not present any change to traffic, parking and amenity, and so therefore these ought not be a relevant factor for consideration. So tonight, my fellow councillors, I implore you to focus your consideration and decision on the matter that is before you. That is, the option and the lease. Tempting as it may be to conflate this with other issues, it would not reflect good decision making. The item in front of us requires the assessment of the terms of the documents, nothing more and nothing less. WASPs are well aware of the risks ahead of them, and if a future development application is brought to council, then that will be the time for considering the factors relevant to the application at that time. For now, future development is a mere hypothetical situation. We don't know what might be presented, if anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillor Coveney, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak at this juncture?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
Please proceed.
I'm a firm believer that to understand the aspirations and concerns of our community, we need to listen with an open and independent mind. I welcome spirited debate, especially on the issues that our community cares so deeply about. Our community has democratically elected us as its decision makers. Leadership is about making decisions, sometimes hard decisions where not everybody agrees. I have and will continue to listen to our community, being both the people in this room and at home. There are merits to both sides of this debate. I explain now where I presently sit after having carefully considered both sides and weighing up the outcomes. I hope that you will listen and accept that opinions which differ from your own are also valid. The largest and oldest sporting club in our city seeks a single home. They believe, based on examples of other successful clubs in WA, that a single location will provide them with their best opportunity to function. They say having all their members in one area they control will improve camaraderie, volunteer rates, membership and revenue through displaying sponsorship and bar sales. Further, that it will guarantee travel times for home games are no longer very long. I understand the arguments against the relocation are the turf nearby, loss of open space, displacement of user groups, financial risk, unknown state position, cost to the city, feasibility results, community support, a prior council decision, removal of trees and cockatoos. There are currently 2 turfs being shared between several clubs, and whilst this new facility will provide 4 turfs, it still doesn't remedy the WASP predicament of game time because they aren't guaranteed access at all times required. Whilst the turfs may be shared by the local clubs, Curtin University and the state and national teams, each of those groups have men's and women's teams and teams at different age levels. We're talking about 80 teams trying to share 4 turfs. Where do we realistically think the WASPs are going to sit in the hierarchy with the state and national teams? They are still economically stifled by not running the bar and needing to pay to play. It doesn't overcome the fundamental issue of not being a single location. I don't find it acceptable to split a family between 2 homes, especially when one of those homes is a share house without a guaranteed bed. If this was such a good deal...
Again, my apologies, Councillor Coveney. The standing orders are quite clear about the gallery remaining silent. You're making it difficult for us to hear, and we're here as decision makers on behalf of the communities. So can we please keep the sniggering and the chuckling? Just knock it off. It's not respectful. Let's all act like adults, please. Please continue, Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If this was such a good deal for the local clubs, then why are both of them still in pursuit of their own single homes? If the lease is granted, there will be a loss of open space, but that's the case for any club with specific turf requirements or even indoor sports courts. The question is the loss outweighed by the benefit? I ask you to consider not what do we lose, but what do we gain? A new neighbour, a new community, maybe even a friend. There is misinformation being spread in the community that the WASP will fence off all of Collier for themselves. If that were true, I'd be signing the petition against it myself. But it's not. Collier is 35,000 square metres, adjacent to Collins Oval, which is 35,000 square metres, adjacent to Bill Graydon Reserve, which is 19,000 square metres. In other words, a total space of 90,000 square metres. And Rye Reserve is across the road. The Wasp proposed synthetic turf is about 5,000 square metres, and whilst the clubhouse size is unknown, their current pavilion is about 1,000 square metres. So we're talking about 6,000 square metres lock and key over an area size of about 90,000 square metres, or 6.5%, or 13% if you adopt the exclusive use footprint of 12,000 square metres. Neither footprint comes remotely close to our golf courses, tennis clubs and bowling greens, many of whom have significantly less members and locals. Our 2 golf clubs are collectively 2.1 million square metres, our 3 tennis clubs are collectively 36,000 square metres, and our 3 bowling clubs are collectively 26,000 square metres. I don't see why we make room for them but not the oldest and largest sporting club in our city. If the Wasps are granted a lease, some existing user groups may be displaced, as would be the case for any group relocating to a space already being used. But Collier isn't actually home to the football, the cricket or the baseball, it's overflow. Clubs like football will have its needs better met if the Wasps relocate because it frees up Richardson. Wasps must co-locate, so their co-locator will benefit. And the Wasps are open to Como Secondary using their turfs, so they too will benefit. There are 8 active reserves in the city. The formal utilisation at Collier is 3%. That is between 3 and 6 times less than all the other reserves in the city except for Como. In the February agenda report, Collier was described as being one of 3 reserves least likely to impact existing users. Respectfully, we can't live in an inner city suburb and expect the block next door to stay vacant forever. We must learn to share. In relation to financial risk, the construction phase is managed by the Wasp being prohibited to build until they prove they have the funds to do so, and the maintenance phase risk is managed by the Wasp requiring a bank guarantee. In addition to their own fundraising, half the build is to be funded by Wesley, and presumably the Wasp are
Councillor
eligible.
Coveney, that's 5 minutes, but I will move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Coveney be granted a further 5 minutes. And that was unanimous. Please continue, Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In addition to their own fundraising, half the build is to be funded by Wesley, and presumably the Wasps are eligible for grants and loans. The city gets a new asset for free and frees up another asset at Richardson. Other clubs have made this work, with Wasp Hockey Club having twice replaced their synthetic turf at their own costs. Like many projects in this city, support from external stakeholders is required before it can proceed. Whilst we don't know whether the state government will support the relocation, we do know that the lease won't be signed if and until they do. I do feel for the residents who will have uncertainty for up to 3 years, but I also feel for the Wasps who've had it for more than a decade. Wasps seek a contribution for lighting, removing a power line over the reserve and more parking. The city is not compelled to contribute anything, but regardless of this relocation, why wouldn't the city do these upgrades to improve the amenity of its existing users? The city recently obtained grant funding for many of its sports reserves. Is there not a possibility for further grant funding in the future? The feasibility study does say this project is viable. The site has room to accommodate an artificial turf and club room. Water use of the synthetic turf is at or below current levels of the reserve. The sports lighting design is compliant. Opportunities for existing clubs are enhanced by freeing up Richardson. Noise, negligible. Community engagement, 558 in support, 49 against. Sustainability modelling shows that the Wasps were viable to manage the facility, and the study concluded that Collier was the only viable option for a single home. For the reasons I've already explained, I don't share the administration's view that the study didn't address particular elements, but in any event, further responses were sought and provided. I struggle to understand the argument that this relocation is not broadly supported in the context of those survey results, but also in the results of the last local government elections, noting residents on both sides of this debate publicly supported and opposed particular candidates. I do accept that some residents, particularly those that live nearby to Collier and some special interest groups, are against the relocation. There have always been some residents who live nearby to any public open space who object to new users. There are always particular residents who object to any new facility in the city, and there are always particular residents who object to the loss of trees. I am not saying your views are not valid. I'm just saying that some of those views may be philosophical and not restricted to this particular motion. There are only 1 in 5 inconsistent decisions in relation to the relocation, and that was the 4-3 decision not to proceed in June 23. In March 19, Council unanimously resolved to support the Wasp feasibility study to relocate to Collier. In July 2019, Council unanimously resolved its community facilities plan to work with the Wasp to relocate to Collier. In July 23, notwithstanding knowledge of the new Hockey WA development, Council unanimously resolved for the City to work with Wasps to find a single local home. And in February 24, Council resolved 4-3 to prepare an option to lease at Collier. Over the years, we have had different councillors with different backgrounds, some with a particular affinity to keeping things as they are, and others with a particular affinity towards development. Councillors have looked at the same set of facts and come to different conclusions. To suggest that a councillor has come to a view inconsistent with your own does not mean that they are not listening, and it doesn't mean they're corrupt. It disregards the enormous time and effort that the people who have put their hand up to try and make our community a better place. It dissuades good people connected in our community from putting their hand up in the future. I have listened and re-listened to the deputations and reread the studies, reports and decisions. Some residents take issue with the Mayor and Councillor Prendiville voting, notwithstanding their compliance with the local government laws and the fact that the 3 practising solicitors on Council reached the same conclusion. The relocation will result in the loss of some trees and some say habitat of cockatoos, and I agree that trees and cockatoos should be retained where possible. But we do live in an inner city suburb, and unfortunately we need to weigh up the loss of a few trees with the alternate benefit. The Wasps are required to plant more trees to mitigate some of that loss. In conclusion, after weighing up all the arguments, I do support the relocation for the reasons I've outlined.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate officer recommendation? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've actually got a few questions.
Fire away.
Thanks. Thank you. My first question is just with regard to some of the comments made by Councillor Coveney. So with regard to grant funding, my understanding that grant funding in this instance may be complicated or may not proceed, given that there is a proposed facility for 135 million Perth Hockey Centre that's going to be developed. And also there are other conditions with regard to achieving grant funding, including shared facilities, as this is something the state is actually trying to achieve in best utilisation and sharing of costs and infrastructure. If the administration could please provide some comments with regard to that.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the Community Sporting and Recreation Facilities Fund has general guidelines associated with grant applications, and the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries has included in the guidelines that there would be co-located and shared use facilities. The advice that we'd previously received from the department was that they would be unlikely to provide additional grant funding for such a facility, given the proximity to the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Another question, Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Director Shaw. With regard to the actual lease itself, I've got a couple of questions. So firstly, were any proposed amendments suggested or discussed with councillors and the administration on that lease agreement, or were there no conversations with regard to any proposed amendments to the lease agreement?
Mr Bradford.
I'm not quite sure what I'll have a crack at answering. So the only discussions on the lease agreement were between us and our lawyers and between us and Wasps.
Thank you, CEO Bradford. And a following question just with regard to the lease as well. So obviously the Wasps have obviously had discussions with the administration. Were there any serious contentious points that would have resulted in the Wasps or their lawyers not wanting to proceed with the lease as it stands? Because I understand we've got to a point that it's fairly amicable at this point in time, but maybe there's some minor parts which aren't acceptable to everyone, but it's not actually a sticking point. Thank you.
Mr Adams, should I send that your way?
So, as stated in the report, we believe we reached in principle agreement. There are obviously some things that we proposed to put in the lease that Wasp weren't entirely happy with, and we negotiated an outcome where they weren't in the lease, and then there were some other things that we wanted in the lease that Wasps didn't want in the lease, and they stayed in the lease because we felt that they were there to protect the city and the state interests.
Mr Bradford?
The lease is actually pretty similar to other leases that we have on Crown land, and they do represent clauses that protect the interests of the state and the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams and Mr Bradford. Any further questions, Councillor Brenda Abrandis? All right. I guess I've got one for the moment, question that is. I think, if I heard Councillor Coveney correctly, I think he referred to a bank guarantee being provided by Wasps, but at least the copy of the lease I'm looking at says at item 16 of the schedule that a bank guarantee isn't applicable. Have I misunderstood that?
No, whilst the lease refers to a bank guarantee, the schedule does not have an amount for a bank guarantee in there, so there is no bank guarantee applicable to it.
All right, thank you. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate officer recommendation? Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Sorry, another question, Mr Mayor. So just with regard to the conversations that we had in the agenda briefing last week, there was obviously a lot of conversation with regard to the Perth Hockey Centre being able to provide virtually everything that the Wasp were needing, apart from having the grass playing field. So would the city be able to confirm that everything that was an issue previously, including revenue streams and their space and the scheduling of their games, was something that the WA Hockey were actually going to be considering?
Mr Bradford?
I don't think Wasps would agree that what is being offered represents what they want, but we've been clear in terms of stating what Hockey WA has said is likely to be offered to clubs. The specific details on access and associated service for local clubs is subject to ongoing discussions, as I said, between Hockey WA, Venues West and the clubs. But Hockey WA has indicated to us that the clubs are intended to be offered access to turf with no outgoings, licence fees, staff or operational costs, maintenance costs, utility charges, and reduced turf hire fees achieved through providing volunteers to be ground controllers, scoreboard operators for training sessions and fixtures. And clubs would also have the ability to conduct summer hockey programs for juniors using free turf hire. And the other things that we mentioned are all things that Hockey WA still intends for clubs to be offered and made available subject to the ongoing discussions.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, Councillor Choi.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Just first one, following on from Councillor Brandis's question. As far as the city administration are aware, and I guess during your time, have any other clubs been offered similar or the same standard of provisions that has been offered to the Wasp Hockey Club in relation to basically a ready-to-go facility?
Just to clarify, Councillor Choi, are you talking about the proposal for Collier Reserve? Are you talking about the proposal at Perth Hockey Stadium?
Yeah, the Perth Hockey Stadium. As far as the city is aware, have any other clubs been offered anything similar in relation to their sport or their activity? Is there anything else that exists in the nearby precincts, districts that has been made available to other clubs?
I'm not sure I understand completely. Are you asking, have other hockey clubs been offered?
No, other sporting clubs. Has there been anything else? That's okay. Obviously, the answer is going to be no from what I'm gathering. That's fine. Thank you. I'll move on to my second question if that's okay.
Far away, and then I think Councillor Coveney had his hand up after that.
I believe the city and all elected members are aware and have had access to the Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 3033, which prioritises the Wasp Hockey Club relocation to the new Australian High Performance Hockey Centre. And I'm just wondering, does the city have any comments on the plan as it pertains to this item, please?
Mr Bradford, should I send that your way?
Yeah, I'll have a go at it. So we received extracts of the plan following a meeting with Hockey WA in July this year, but not the complete plan. We received access to the complete plan last week. Having said that, the plan has been in development by Hockey WA for over a year, and their advice to us and reflects very much the recommendations and the findings of that are now articulated in more detail in that facilities plan, and goes to things like the overall demand for turfs in the metropolitan area, which is reflected in previous reports that we've made, the need for turfs to be viable and the size of club necessary to sustain viability from a turf perspective, and also obviously the Perth Hockey Stadium development, which I think in the published version of the facilities plan, it indicates there might be 3 turfs. That was under discussion, I think, for a period. Hockey WA, as far as we know, have confirmed that 4 turfs will be built. So whilst we've only had the access to the facilities plan for a relatively short period, the advice from Hockey WA that has been given to us is consistent with all of the things that are in that report, and we've reflected that in the advice we've provided to elected members.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Coveney, you've spoken, so I assume this is a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The Hockey WA plan circulated on Friday refers to between 3 and 5 local clubs using the new facility. We were previously told it was 3 clubs utilising the facility. Can you please shed some light on this?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So Wasp is one of the 3 home clubs that are currently using Perth Hockey Stadium, and they receive priority booking times for training sessions on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the senior and junior sides, depending on the fixture obligations of their home games and how it's scheduled at the venue. So the current Perth Hockey Stadium provides access to the 2 international standard playing surfaces, but the revised proposal for the new Australian High Performance Hockey Stadium provides additional opportunities for the 3 clubs, being Wasp, Curtin and Xavier, to use the facility and grow hockey. And the reason being is because they're providing the 4 turfs and the 2 additional playing pitches that they can use. So there's capacity for the existing 3 clubs to utilise the new centre with additional capacity to grow.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Coveney?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to confirm the answer to one of last week's question, which was, can you confirm that Hockey WA hasn't publicly guaranteed the Wasp game time for every time they need it?
Ms Shaw or Mr Bradford? No, Ms Shaw.
Thank you. No, they haven't, and that would be subject to future fixtures by Hockey WA and the negotiations with the clubs.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, what are we? Oh, we're back to against. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate officer recommendation? That's Councillor Devard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan overall indicated that hockey numbers have not changed over 5 years, and have also suggested rationalisation of artificial turfs and the use of multi-sport spaces with those turfs. They also took into account prospective school turf aspirations, and they also consider that there isn't a need for any further turf arrangements in the intercity areas, and that it would be better if those were devolved somewhat. While I recognise Wasp Hockey Club is well patronised, offers all ages playing teams, and has a long history of residence in the city of South Perth, that really is not an argument for claiming Collier Reserve as a new home, when we know there is a myriad of tiny sporting groups that also warrant some considerations. I understand that should a synthetic turf be seriously considered, Richardson Park could actually be a feasible solution for that kind of an installation. Richardson Park train station remains ungazetted as a Metropolitan Transport Initiative, so that would suggest Richardson Park is still an acceptable arrangement for Wasp Hockey for some time to come. The proposal for WASPs at Collier Reserve will effectively tie the city to at least a 24-year commitment. I recognise large programs do need lead time, but visualising the city even 10 years from now would suggest that residential density will have increased quite considerably and that we will be seeking every opportunity to have green space working to offer a livable environment for a growing city population. I note that the proposal for the 43 replacement trees in the documentation suggests that the trees would be placed on reserves. And that was a general descriptor, not really saying located on Collier Reserve. So we may have the eternal issue of shifting the problem to some other city location. 43 mature trees, some of which are pines that offer a summer diet for black-tailed cockatoos, will need to be removed, and of course replacing mature trees with saplings is somewhat an exercise in cynicism. And for those reasons, I oppose the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, is there Councillor Choi a question or speaking?
I just have a question, please, Mr Mayor.
Fire away.
Thank you. Just referring to a point raised by Councillor Navard, I recall the city providing some advice a while back now, so I just want to see if this is correct or not, and we haven't discussed it since, I don't believe, that the Wasp Hockey Club were able now to install synthetic turf at Richardson Reserve if they so wanted to, but they didn't want to. That was my recollection. Can someone just remind us of what happened there, please?
So in response to a previous notice of motion, the city did look at other locations within the city. And I don't have it in front of me, but in terms of Richardson, the original feasibility study for Richardson considered placing a turf in between the two hockey grounds. And that was determined as being not viable for a range of reasons. More recently, we had a suggestion by somebody who was actually involved, had knowledge of that original feasibility study, and they suggested another location in Richardson that would be closer to the freeway side. So that was identified as a possible location, but in our we did no detailed consideration of that, and I think in the report we noted that there would be significant issues in considering any of the alternate sites, including Richardson, and that particular site of Richardson, it was quite complex in terms of land tenure and things like that. So that's about as far as we went.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Brenda Brandis, I think, was first there, speaking or asking a question?
Asking a question.
Fire away.
And this question follows on from CEO Bradford's response. So just with regard to Richardson Oval, I understand from last week's agenda briefing that the South Perth Baseball Club, it was noted that it was a winter sport. So therefore, relocating it to Richardson Oval might be acceptable. Could I please have some clarity whether that is in fact correct, and also whether there is actually capacity at Richardson Oval with competing clubs and scheduling to accommodate the South Perth Baseball Club?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the question from last week, the preamble to the question was, could another winter sport? And it was referring to South Perth United Football Club, which is a winter sport. And then it said the baseball club. So South Perth United Football Club, as a winter sport, could potentially relocate to Richardson, but the baseball club is a summer sport and therefore would not be able to go to Richardson because the cricket plays there.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Director Shaw. So with regard to the baseball club, are there any options available to it with regard to this?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We haven't looked into that further to see where they could be accommodated.
Mr Bradford, anything to add, or?
The baseball could still be at least partly accommodated at Collier, yeah, and Collins.
All right. Thank you.
Don't have to move.
Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to clarify, does the city carry a financial risk for every club building on its land over the asset life cycle?
Mr Adams, should I send that your way?
Yes. So obviously any asset on our land requires the city to maintain it or have some strategy in place for replacing it or using another asset at the end of its useful life to deliver the same services that are being delivered by that asset. So all of the buildings on city land do have some financial impact on the city.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If the oldest club in our city, 90 years, suddenly decides to go belly up and it can't meet its maintenance costs in the long term, can the city manage these costs with a bulldozer?
Mr Adams or Ms Amprimo?
So, I mean, the risks are what they are. I mean, how you deal with them in the future is a matter for a further council decision. But it's unlikely that if an asset is built on city land that if it's still got useful life, that the city is going to go and knock it down. In more cases than not, the council and the city would decide to keep the asset running and delivering a service to the community. So it would be unlikely that an asset such as that with life left in it would simply be bulldozed.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Choi.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just wanted to turn back to my follow-up question from what I asked before about the synthetic turf at Richardson Reserve. As no real investigation has been undertaken, is it a possibility then, if this motion was to fail, that that is something that the city could further investigate?
Mr Bradford.
So if council resolved not to proceed with Collier, it would be open to council to decide to look at other options. Having said that, the city has recommended Perth Hockey Stadium as the likely site. And also, given that we have done a desktop review of other sites within the city and identified, I don't have the list in front of me, but identified a number of possibilities, but I think we highlighted that each of them would have significant issues and each would require the relocation of existing users. So I think the reality is that there are very few spaces in the city that are suitable for a hockey turf on land that is controlled by the city.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, is there someone who would like to speak in favour of the alternate? Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have heard from a large cross-section of our community and we've heard from elected members many times about this topic. I would like to just acknowledge the passion from the community, from everyone that has been involved in this item. My inbox, as I'm sure like other elected members, has exploded, which either way I think is fantastic to hear from so many passionate members of our community. I, like others, have done my best to respond to all of the emails. I do apologise to those residents if you didn't get a response, but it is hard to keep up sometimes. Please be rest assured that everything is read, everything is appreciated that has been received. Tonight, I speak in support of this alternate officer recommendation, and I will speak to the points on the recommendation. I have previously spoken in length on other points on this topic, but I believe for this evening it's important to stay on task, and our role is to deliberate and vote on what is in front of us. A couple of points I'd like to make. One of these being consistency, and this has been touched on by some of the other elected members as well. Our consistency is an element of vital importance, and as we look back on our history of this topic in particular, our city has supported this hockey club's endeavours of their future sustainability for over a decade. We go back to 2012, where City of South Perth has approved contribution towards the search of this facility, covering the 3 elements that the club has from the very beginning told us and everybody that it requires for its future. They were told to look further than Richardson Park, expanding their search. 2015, they commissioned GHD to undertake a feasibility study on Richardson Park. 2019, we're approving applications to the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries for assistance in this feasibility study at Collier. And I note it was ranked as #1 as a first priority, and the response from the city was positive, noting the growing nature of the sport, its movement away from grass, and we know all of this. Unfortunately, for the hockey club, although Richardson Park may now be reconsidered as a possibility, they were told to move away from that and focus their efforts on Collier Reserve, and they were told this by the city. So that's what they did. I think the only inconsistent decision that was made was June in last year. There were some issues that arose through this process, and I think through the option to lease motion from February in 2024, a lot of this was resolved. There were a few things such as area being available for use by members of the general public for activities such as walking, dog exercise, other passive recreation facility activities when not in use by WASPs. And again, in this motion, the financial risk was touched on, being that the club must demonstrate to the city's satisfaction it has secured funding. This has resulted in this option and this lease document that we see in front of us. Here we are in September, we have the lease. A lot of work has gone into this, and I want to acknowledge and appreciate all the back and forth and the work from the city and the club that has gone into this. It's a thorough document, and from my understanding and my reading through it, there are elements in there that free up the city from a lot of this risk. Just like to touch on the High Performance Hockey Centre. There has been contradicting information. We have heard from the city that, you know, the offerings that the association, the High Performance Hockey Centre will be offering, and we've heard different things from the club and different things again from other members of the community. I think it's unfortunate that we're not going to get the opportunity to hear directly from the association prior to this vote, but so be it. We have heard also many people stating that this solution at the High Performance Hockey Centre is the best solution, and it is a solution, and for some it's the best solution, but it needs to be noted that for the hockey club, it's not the best solution. And they've made that very clear, and it's not for us or for anyone to sit here and say
Councillor Prendeville, that is 5 minutes, so I will move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes. Could someone, Councillor Coveney seconding, thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Prendeville be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. And that was unanimous. Please continue, Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like I said, I just think it needs to be noted that although there are many solutions on the table, and some are best for some groups of the community and some are best for others, the High Performance Hockey Centre has a great offering, and we are lucky to have that in Perth, but it needs to be noted that it's not the best solution according to the hockey club, and I think the WASPs are the best people to recognise the best solution for them. That being said, going through this lease, the document, I believe, lands all of the risk on the hockey club and not really on the city. It covers things like the liable costs or expenses in relation to the premises or anything occurring on the premises, the development, contributions towards development, financial or otherwise, and all risks associated with the development work, including, without limitation, financing, designing, constructing, all landing on the club itself. and also removal of improvements provision to make good is outlined in point 8 of the lease as well. So for these, the lease itself and what's in the alternate officer recommendation that we are deliberating on this evening, I support this alternate officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Councillors, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, question or speaking?
Question, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Could the administration just please advise with regard to those last comments made by Councillor Prendeville, with regard to the lease and obviously the proposal is the development by WASPs, and therefore some of those items that would be attached to their development for this lease should reside with them. Could the administration just confirm that that's appropriate, given that the city would not be developing and constructing the site, and then therefore it's appropriate they reside with WASPs?
Sorry, Councillor Brenda Brandis, I didn't quite understand that question. Could you have another go at that, please?
Yeah. So Councillor Prendeville indicated that there were certain aspects in the lease which were unfair or inappropriately burden on WASPs, and some of those refer to additional costs, make good, or any other liabilities sort of attached with the actual development. So if the city could advise if this is fairly standard and appropriate, given that the WASPs are actually developing or would be developing and constructing this infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr Adams?
Yes, so we only put into the lease clauses which we felt were appropriate in terms of protecting the city's interests. I would disagree with the comments that say that they go too far. I mean, they do put a lot of the risk back onto the club, but I guess that, as you say, is because the club is the one doing the development, the club is the one requesting the development, and the club needs to be responsible for addressing those risks rather than the city being liable for those risks.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Choi, I think, was first, then Councillor Prendeville. Speaking or asking a question, Councillor Choi?
Question, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Fire away.
Look, there's been repeated mentions of consistency tonight, and I'm just wondering, because I recall that the city has already addressed this in terms of that things have changed over the course of time since this was first presented to council, I think back in 2020, and new information, new opportunities have arisen, and perhaps that's why those changes have been made, and we've had to be flexible and move with those changes and the recommendations that have come forth from the city. Is that correct?
Mr Bradford?
So let me say, is the question that there have been changes since this is over the time this has been considered? Yes, there have been changes. Well before my time at the city, I think one of the guiding factors for certainly the 2016 decision to look to Collier was the potential for a South Perth train station. And that, I think, a South Perth train station is still likely to happen at some point, but the urgency for that has gone. And in any case, the actual impact on Richardson Park of a train station is something for a future consideration. So I think that's changed. The biggest change from my perspective is that I think, yes, the Perth Hockey Stadium has been subject to upgrades at various points in time, but importantly, after the detailed feasibility study was delivered, I think in late 2022, after that, the state government first announced they were bidding for the retention of the High Performance Hockey Centre, I think in October 2022. And then in December, I think the 2nd of December 2022, it was announced that it had been retained. For me, that's the single biggest change that has occurred, and that has been reflected in the city's advice.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Prendeville, I think you had your hand up as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify earlier. I know Councillor Brenda Randis mentioned, I think I referred to the items in the lease as inappropriate, or I just want to clarify that that's not what I said or meant. I was just outlining that it was putting risk back on to the club and not the city, but I didn't want to make any mention that I believe that those areas of the lease were inappropriate at all. Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Coveney, a question?
A question. Thank you, Mr Mayor. A few questions. Is it correct that there's been no material change in circumstances between the June 23 Ordinary Council meeting to date?
Mr Adams or Mr Bradford?
What circumstances?
Any material change in circumstances that would affect this motion?
Since June 2023, did you say?
That's right, when this came back to council after, I think, the feasibility study.
So we've received more information from Hockey WA on what they were offering. Trying to think of what else may have changed. Director Shaw might have some additional points.
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was confirmed in February of this year that there would be 4 turfs developed, which would provide the access.
Councillor Coveney?
Thank you. I understand at the briefing meeting last week we were told that there's been no material change in circumstances since February 24. Is that correct?
Ms Shaw?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Councillors, up to against. Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the alternate? Councillor Choi?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I initially prepared a lengthy speech for tonight's discussion, but I've chosen to forego that in light of the fact that this item has come before council multiple times already over the years, for which I've already spoken to the issues as I saw them and which unfortunately appears unchanged. In fact, we've just discussed tonight and gone over again tonight the new information and new facts that have and opportunities that have arisen over the last year. So, as educated and insightful individuals, we all understand the nuances of what is being proposed and the inherent risk of proceeding with this alternative recommendation and against the officer's substantive recommendation. We are fortunate to be surrounded by engaged and knowledgeable residents too, many of whom have invested considerable time and effort in crafting and presenting detailed submissions for this council to consider and aid in our decision making. These contributions have addressed a wide range of issues related to the proposal at hand, from the increasing demand and challenges associated with the provision of club facilities, both single and shared, best practices in project management, to environmental impact assessments. The City has provided us with important information and further advice on this proposal too, including potential project management challenges and financial risks, both known and anticipated. Unfortunately, no environmental impact studies have been undertaken for this proposal, and nor I recall any were requested, and this lack of impact knowledge and verification does raise concerns. Although we did hear this evening that the City's proposed urban greening strategy will likely be impacted. Throughout our discussions, it's become increasingly clear that public open space is a diminishing resource in South Perth, particularly in Como, as highlighted by the statistics presented by officers last week. Our local government will undoubtedly face growing pressure from the community in the coming months and years regarding the use and potential rationalisation of public open spaces across our district. The state's infill mandate has not helped matters. Additionally, we must be continuously mindful of the issue of expectation and how our actions and statements, both as a local government entity and as individual council members, can influence community perceptions and aspirations. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the contributions of the Wasp Hockey Club, the Friends of Collier Reserve and others in the community who have participated on this item and aided in our discussions and deliberations. It's been truly valuable to hear from everyone and gain that all-rounder perspective. I trust that through our debate tonight, by carefully considering all the evidence and testimonials presented, we'll make a decision as a council that serves the best interests of the community and this local government. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the alternate officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? No? Is there anyone else who would like to speak against? Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support active recreation and the role it plays in the community and the significant role that the Wasps and Wesley College contribute to the city. I support the Wasp Hockey Club having a permanent location with a co-located hockey facility. The lease option is not feasible. I do not support the lease option for many reasons, but summarised with regard to waste, cost, environment and exclusivity. I also support a community that considers public open space as invaluable for many reasons, and the requirement that this retains public access for passive and active use. The officer's recommendation is clear, and it was in July 23, February 24, and now September 24. I understand the city's concerns and have no valid reason to oppose their recommendation. There are numerous existing users at Collier Reserve: the South Perth Junior Cricket Club, the South Perth United Football Club, the South Perth Baseball Club, 2 occasional soccer groups, a multitude of local people using it to recreate actively, people walking their dogs. The space is invaluable. Currently we have about 43,000 people living in the city, and it's expected to increase to about 62,000 people by 2050. This is a 43% increase in our population under the Perth Appeal at 3.5 million. Currently, the active public open space is around about 5 square metres per person, and with this population increase alone, it will reduce to about 3.3 square metres. And this is below the recommended guidelines of 6.5 metres for active public open space. And this will further reduce with exclusive area closed off for the proposed Wasp Hockey Stadium. That's 12,000 square metres that will be lost. Como has 2.97% public open space under the local planning scheme, and citywide it's only 4%. The loss of the public open space on Collins Reserve will reduce Como's public open space by a further 7.5%. The city is established with limited to no opportunity to access or acquire additional public open space. Environmental sustainability has not been considered. This project didn't consider sustainability measures in context of heat island impact, the scale of the concrete infrastructure, the synthetic turfs, and the waste of resources in replicating facilities and playing turfs. Taken into consideration, there will be a Perth Hockey Centre within 1 kilometre. There could potentially be additional turfs at the Como Secondary College, as with Aquinas. The environmental sustainability has been disregarded to this effect. The loss of trees are a concern. We heard from the South Perth tree canopy advocates, and the city's tree canopy cover is less than 16%. Approximately 40 plus mature trees will be removed for this development. The size and the scale of the canopy cover to replace that will take a significant time. The adverse environmental impacts and effects with regard to the synthetics were raised in the agenda briefing, and this included urban heat, permeability of water, toxicity to soil, microbiology and contamination runoff. And we should not be increasing these type of facilities when shared uses could be replicated on one location. The proposal does not consider environmental impacts to the threatened black cockatoos. The habitat impact assessment has not taken into consideration the loss of habitat, vegetation and the fragmentation of habitat that impacts the endemic black cockatoos. Any local development impact that is likely to have a direct impact on cockatoos, either through roosting or foraging, should be given a high priority. This impact on cockatoos may be due to loss of vegetation, increased heat island temperatures, artificial lighting, or car strikes with regard to the increased vehicle activity, and this is not uncommon in the city. The Perth Peel Carnaby population makes up a majority of the species, and the Collie Park roost is the most populous south of the river on the Swan Coastal Plain. The feasibility study does not
Councillor Brenda Brandis, that's 5 minutes, but I will move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes, seconded by Councillor D'Souza. Thank you. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Brenda Brandis be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. And that was unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Please continue.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. The feasibility study does not consider environmental sustainability in context of the endemic threatened black cockatoos. This development is a high cost to the ratepayers of the city and also a financial risk. The city is expected to incur significant capital costs with this development, which would otherwise be no cost if shared facilities at the proposed Australia Hockey Centre were considered. And some of those costs we've heard about. So long-term renewal costs, subsequent operating costs, infrastructure costs, car park, lighting upgrades. These are all costs that would actually be borne by the ratepayers of the city, which could otherwise be not incurred at all if the shared facility was going to be used. This option represents a very high cost for a single-use asset on Crown land vested in the city. The opportunity cost for the city in incurring these additional capital costs, which could otherwise be saved, could very well impact other infrastructure developments, including possibility of multi-use indoor sports courts or the upgrade of other existing infrastructure, which we are aware that there are quite a lot of ageing infrastructure in the city that does need capital expenditure. The estimated $14.8 million cost for this proposal is a concern. The financial viability is a concern. We only have one major donor of $200,000 and the likelihood of achieving state grant funding, as we've heard tonight, is highly unlikely given the fact that this will be a single-use asset and the development of the Australian Hockey Centre within the 1 kilometre would negate any additional grants for this project. So the financial viability is a concern. We also need to consider this in context of there's been no escalation to the cost. So if we look at the ABS building construction indices, so from Q2 2023 to Q2 2024, 1 year, there's 11.5% increase in the construction indices. And that's only 1 year. Now, it might not be the same rate of increase over the 3-year period we're talking about, but even if it was only 11.5% over the entire 3-year period, cumulative compounding, we'd be talking about an additional $1.7 million. So, and that is something that has not been factored in. This is a single-use development, and the project is not justified on that basis. I consider $15 million to be a very high price to pay for hockey pitches in one location when you have the access to all of this for free under a state-of-the-art facility for $135 million, which is going to be covered, including operating costs and all capital costs. The city have previously advised that Hockey WA have indicated that the following would be provided to WASPs, including significant access to fixtures, priority access for training for junior and senior teams, meeting rooms, function rooms, the conduct of the summer holiday hockey programs. There'll be no outgoings with regard to lease and licence fees, and no repairs or maintenance costs, to name a few. Other alternatives do present themselves, which have not been given due consideration at this point in time. The Como Secondary College, which is in a desperate need of funding and capital injection. Also, the Aquinas College, potential development there as well, where it's been indicated that at
60 seconds, Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Potential for a multi-purpose Category 4 surface turf is on the agenda. The community have spoken. The community have spoken about financial viability, environmental sustainability, the loss of public open space, community recreating aspects, and also the loss to the other clubs and sporting groups, the endemic black cockatoos, the ongoing city capital costs, which could be avoided if the sharing of the Australian Hockey Centre was to be used. We've heard from user groups, including COSPRA, the Salt Point Community Group, the Friends of Collie Reserve, South Perth Tree Canopy Advocates, and the South Perth United Football Club. They've all spoken in favour of retaining that public open space. For these reasons, I cannot support this motion. I consider that the best option is before us with regard to the Australian Hockey Centre. I have considered this based on its merits.
That's time, Councillor Brenda Brandis. All right. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the alternate officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to speak against. Firstly, just want to say it's great that we have so many people turn up tonight. I think it's important, and local democracy is well served by having what's been, at least for the most part, a respectful debate with very firm views expressed on both sides, a robust debate, but I hope we can get some resolution on this matter tonight. So firstly, I want to say I'm not affiliated to the Friends of Collie Reserve or the Wasps or any group party to this issue tonight. I come to this issue with an open mind. In fact, when Council was considering to end this process in June 2023, I actually voted against that and supported the Wasps to keep the issue going in order to give the Wasps more time. However, in my mind, in the last 15 months, there have been significant changes in the policy environment. Three major things pop to mind for me. The first is we have more clarity around the access and use of the High Performance Centre at Curtin. The second is the escalating costs, as Councillor Brenda Brandis has mentioned. And the third is the potential for Como Senior High School to have turfs of their own, and you add to that the fact that Aquinas might also potentially have some. After pouring 135 mil into the Curtin facility, I think it's extremely unlikely the state government would fund anything further hockey related in a nearby radius. I think Wasps would also understand and agree with that. And as I've mentioned, the fact that Como and Aquinas might get further turfs, again, speculative, I agree, but the fact that that's even being considered would further add weight to the fact that saturation of turfs would undercut fiscal viability going forward. Now, the costings in 2022 were about 15 million, and given the escalation in material costs and building costs, this would probably be closer to 17 mil. And at the end of the 3-year option to lease, should that proceed, it might even get up to 20 mil. And if we assume Wesley cover half of that, it still leaves 7 to 10 mil for the Wasps to find. And I don't envy this task. It is an invidious task position that Wasps are in to find that amount of cash. And I commend them on securing 200K to date. But 7 to 10 mil is a long way off. And even some a group as well resourced as a council like us, as the City of South Perth, would struggle to find and justify 10 mil plus of cash on a single infrastructure bill. My guiding principle, my North Star on the 7 years I've been on this council, has always been responsible financial management. And a big part of that is being mindful of long-term financial risk. Having done my due diligence and carefully listened respectfully to both sides of the debate last week, I unfortunately can't support the option to lease proceeding. And it pains me to say this and do this, it really does, because Wasps is a fantastic club. And I was moved by the personal experiences relayed last week and in the past. Wasps have unfairly been thrust into this tense public debate. And I did support them in June, July last year. But my duty is to the city as a whole. I really wish there was a different set of circumstances. If there was no high performance centre going forward and no potential for Como Senior High School or Aquinas building their own turf, this is a different ballgame. This is a slam dunk for Wasps. But that's not how the cards have fallen. And I'm really sorry, Wasps. I'm really sorry for Wasps that this has occurred in this way. And I guess that's the irony in terms of the difficulty of public life. We have to make tough decisions like this, and that's where I agree with Councillor Coveney. This is not something that I think any councillor on this council has come to easily. I think public service is about making these tough calls, and we have to sort of make them and stand by them, because we can't always please everyone all the time. And I can only deal with the issues in front of me and the merits as they stand. And in discharging my duty to protect the city's best interest and the best interests of the ratepayers, I can't support the option to lease.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. I was going to ask at this point if there was anyone else that wanted to speak, but I think I'm the only one that hasn't spoken yet, so I guess I'll do that now. I'm speaking against. Councillors, like you, I've read the officer report, I've read the material that's been made available to all councillors in last Friday's councillor bulletin. I've read the Hockey WA Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 2033, released very recently. I wasn't able to be here last week for the council agenda briefing, but I did listen very carefully to the recording, all 5.5 hours of it. I've read almost all of the emails that have come in from our communities, save for the massive burst that happened today. I'm sorry, there just wasn't time. In the time I've got available, I'll try and set out the reasons why I've come to the decision that I have, because, well, I think our community deserves that. I won't go over the background. That's been pretty well covered previously by the other speakers. Here we are in September 2024 with a draft option to lease and a draft lease document before us for our consideration. And the question's been asked both last week and this week, what's changed, if anything? To my mind, some things have changed, or at the very least, there's additional information available that perhaps wasn't available or wasn't quite as certain previously. Last month, Hockey WA released its Strategic Facilities Plan 2023 to 2033. And this plan goes into some detail about the current demand for synthetic turf playing fields in Western Australia. That plan's been made available to all councillors, so I won't go into chapter and verse, but I will read the following excerpts from page 4. Quote, "Hockey participation levels in WA have been relatively constant for the past 5 years, despite the state experiencing population growth of more than 6% over that period. In contrast, the number of synthetic turf installations has grown by 40% in the metropolitan area and in 15% in country areas in the past 5 years. This growth in the number of turfs has now effectively saturated the market. Unless there is a significant increase in the number of players available to play and train on turf, additional turf developments is likely to jeopardise the viability of existing installations, particularly in the metropolitan area." On the same report page, the report goes on. "In the metropolitan area, there are currently as many as 12 additional turf proposals. This is clearly beyond the demonstrated need and capacity of the sport over the next decade, particularly in light of the recent announcement that the Hockey Australia High Performance Program will continue to be hosted at the Perth Hockey Stadium and that these facilities will be upgraded. The conclusions that appear at section 12 of the plan are equally blunt. I don't claim to be an expert on the economics of synthetic turf hockey fields, but the findings of Hockey WA's Strategic Facilities Plan does seem relevant to our decision tonight. We also know a little bit more about what could be provided for Wasps at Perth Hockey Stadium. We previously understood that the High Performance Hockey Centre would feature 3 synthetic turf fields, but it seems that now 4 turf fields will be available. Wasps have clearly stated that the High Performance Hockey Centre and Hockey WA cannot meet their needs, but on the other hand, Hockey WA seem to be saying that they can. Hockey WA have advised the city that local clubs, including Wasps, are likely to receive a range of benefits. I won't list them, but Councillor Brenda Abrantes has rattled off quite a few of them, and it does feature in the material that's been provided to all councillors. I note the question of signage was specifically raised last week. Hockey WA have advised the city that the offer of club signage is available. Apparently people haven't taken that up in the past because of the efforts of putting hard copy signs up and removing them before and after club fixtures. But And there's apparently a large electronic scoreboard available, and I'm reading from the information provided to councillors here, quote, "There is capacity for the club to use that in many ways, including but not limited to using a club-specific template, advertising, club notices, videos or pictures from the club." And presumably that could be used to facilitate sponsorship opportunities. That's almost 5 minutes for me. Would someone be kind enough, I think Councillor Brenda Browness was first, seconded by Councillor Coveney. Councillors, please cast your votes as to whether I be granted another 5 minutes to speak. That was unanimous, and thank you, councillors, for the indulgence. It's not clear to me why Hockey WA and Wasps have what appear to be such different positions, but we are obliged to make decisions based on the information before us. Wasps have argued that their needs can't be properly met at Perth Hockey Stadium. They've argued that the survival of their club depends on a co-location of a clubhouse, grass playing fields and synthetic turf fields. I absolutely accept that access to synthetic turf playing fields is a need for a modern, financially sustainable hockey club. I accept the arguments that Wasps have been losing players to rival clubs that have better access to synthetic turf. I might be wrong, but I'm not as persuaded that exclusive access to co-located club rooms, grass playing fields and synthetic turf is a strict necessity for a modern, financially sustainable hockey club. Can certainly see why that's an advantage, and I can see why Wasps would want it, but I don't think I can disregard what Hockey WA has had to say. I won't go on too much longer, but I will note that I would have required a substantial guarantor to Wasps' obligations under the option and the proposed lease, preferably one with fairly deep pockets. Councillor Prendeville, I think quite rightly, noted that most of the risk under the proposed transaction was sitting on Wasps' shoulders, but Wasps probably don't have sufficient assets to meet their potential obligations under the lease in the event that things go pear-shaped. That is absolutely not a criticism of Wasps. It would be surprising if a local sporting club did have assets of that scale, but I don't think that absolves council of our responsibility to ensure that the city has adequate security against obligations owed to the city. So, to conclude, if the High Performance Hockey Centre was not going ahead, my vote may well have been different, albeit with some proposed changes to the draft lease. If Hockey WA wasn't offering Wasps the terms that they seem to be offering to Wasps, noting that nothing's certain or agreed at this stage, again, my vote may well have been different. I have a great deal of affection for Wasps. That's no secret. I've always been upfront about that. I have a great deal of affection for a great many of the sitting sporting clubs and associations. But I have a duty to do what I think is in the best interests of our community as a whole, regardless of the personal affection that I have for Wasps. I will be voting against the alternate officer recommendation, and someone should. I'll foreshadow the officer recommendation if the alternate officer recommendation is not carried. That's all. We've all spoken. Councillor Waugh was the mover of the alternate officer recommendation. If she would like to do so, Councillor Waugh, you have 5 minutes to rebut any arguments made during the debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we have heard a lot of statements that have been made on behalf of other organisations and other government departments and the like. And it is unfortunate that this council will not have the opportunity to consider information from them directly. I note that a lot of things that have been raised tonight I would consider irrelevant. And as I said earlier, we do not have any information before us in respect to funding. We don't have a detailed costing. We don't have a development application before us. We don't have information from the High Performance Hockey Centre as to what has been or what has not been offered other than what has been told to us secondhand. I think my colleague, Councillor D'Souza, thank you. My colleague, Councillor D'Souza, said that we must deal with the issues in front of us. And he is 100% right. We must deal with the issues that are in front of us. And as I said earlier, the issues in front of us are the option and the lease. We do not have a development application in front of us. We do not have an application for construction of anything. We do not have an application for removal of trees. We do not have any costings or anything in front of us that can enable us to make a decision on those grounds. I do note that that Councillor Brenda Abrandis spoke in respect to the loss of public open space. And I do 100% accept the public open space issues, but as a result of infill development, that is something that will continue. However, every time you lose something, you gain something. And we're not losing public open space to a development or more housing. When we're losing a public open space to gain an active sports space, then we are gaining a community facility, and I implore you to consider that. But once again, I'm just going to come straight back to it. Tonight is about an option and a lease. So again, tempting as it may be to conflate this with all of the other issues that have been raised, it does not reflect good decision making. The item in front of us requires the assessment of the terms of the documents. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, I'm about to put the alternate officer recommendation to the vote, noting that I have foreshadowed that if the alternate officer recommendation fails, I will be moving the officer recommendation. So with that in mind, please cast your votes on the alternate officer recommendation. All right, the votes are in. The alternate officer recommendation has been lost, 3 votes to 5. Those who voted in favour were Councillor Waugh, Councillor Coveney and Councillor Prendeville. Those who voted against were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Choi, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Navard and myself, Mayor Milner. Okay. No, folks, that will be deeply disappointing for a large section of our community. Let's be respectful, even if some people in the gallery might be happy with the result. There are a large number of people that are not happy with the result. So, I indicated that I would move the officer recommendation. That's the one that's appearing at page 8 of the agenda. I'll see if anyone's willing to second that. Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, I don't have anything else to say that I haven't already spoken. I haven't enjoyed having to make this decision, but I've done what I think is in the best interests of the community. The arguments have been made on both sides, and with the alternate officer recommendation having not been carried, then it remains to carry the officer recommendation. That's all I've got to say. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, anything that you'd like to say?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've said enough tonight. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney?
Just a question, Mr Mayor. Do we, in relation to point 2 of this item, in relation to the CEO continuing to work with Wasps and Hockey WA to provide a home at the High Performance Centre, is there not already a requirement for the CEO to do that? So in not passing this motion, that still continues regardless?
Mr Adams or Ms Shaw? Who should I send that to? Mr Adams?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So there's no obligation for the city to continue to work with the WASP to facilitate discussions between the WASP and Hockey WA. that was provided there should council seek to request the CEO to continue to have those discussions and to, I suppose, represent WASP in discussions with Hockey WA as to their access requirements to the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre. So if it was the case that that section had been removed, it would have been the case that council would have resolved not to grant the option to lease, and the city would not engage further with WASPs about their potential location or use of the Australian High Performance Hockey Centre.
Just to be clear, we're not representing WASPs in discussions, but we think that from a community perspective that Hockey WA, the local clubs and the city should be working together to get the best outcome for all concerned, and we think that's a valid thing to occur.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, thank you, Ms Shaw and Mr Bradford. Councillor Coveney.
Thank you. Sorry, just to be clear, so if council doesn't resolve this motion, then the city won't be a part of the discussions with Hockey WA and WASPs in relation to the centre?
The city will continue to have discussions with Hockey WA. We have offered to WASPs to participate in discussions with Hockey WA, so thus far they have declined that offer. But we think it is in the interest of the entire community of South Perth for the city, WASPs and Hockey WA to work together for the best outcome at Perth Hockey Stadium, but also at Richardson Park as well.
Right. Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? Councillor Waugh.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I'm going to raise a point of order, and I have raised this earlier, and I do appreciate that perhaps people didn't quite understand, but I find myself in a very difficult position at the moment because the motion that was passed in February requests the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a deed granting an option. The recommendation that is provided to us now is resolves not to grant an option. Clause 16.2 of the standing orders says that the council or committee is not to consider a motion to revoke or change a decision where at the time the motion is moved or notice is given, any action has been taken under clause 16.3 to implement the decision. And then subclause 2 says the council or a committee may consider a motion to revoke or change the decision if the motion is accompanied by a written statement of the legal or financial consequences carrying the motion. So as I raised earlier, I am concerned about the legality of the officer recommendation, and for that reason, I will be abstaining from voting on this item.
I don't think you can abstain from voting, Councillor Waugh.
I'm content to leave the chamber if you require me to do so.
Well, it's not me, it's the Local Government Act. It says pretty clearly that a councillor can't abstain from voting.
It can if it's unlawful, though.
I'll defer to Mr Adams on this, Councillor Waugh, but I don't think the officer recommendation is unlawful. But Mr Adams?
So I believe that the last decision that council made was with regard to the option to lease and the lease agreement. So council have already voted on that. Going with the officer recommendation, in my view, doesn't revoke anything. So, as I previously stated, that the previous motion that the councillor referred to was to prepare a lease and an option to lease, and I would have thought the purpose of bringing it back to council was for council to vote on whether to proceed with it. Council has just voted not to. I don't see how the officer recommendation, which is not to proceed, can be revoking that particular motion.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor Waugh, if you wanted to leave the chamber, I understand, subject to anything that governance or Mr Adams has to say, that is an option available to you. Is that something you wish to do now?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, I'll give you a moment. I probably should have asked this while Councillor Wall was still in the room, but that's permissible under the Local Government Act and the relevant regulations. I know the Department of Local Government doesn't like it, but...
If she's not in the room, she can't vote.
All right, thank you. Well, in that case, councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the officer recommendation? No? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favour? No? Well, there being no debate, I'll simply put the officer recommendation to the vote. All right. So the votes are now in. The officer recommendation has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Again, folks, please, some of you may be quite pleased by that decision, but there's a substantial member of our community who will be bitterly upset with that decision. So let's not celebrate in the chamber. I think now might be a good idea to have a 10-minute adjournment. We've been at it for a while now, so I'm going to ask everyone to reconvene in the chamber at 10 minutes to 9. folks, we're reconvening, so if people can please take their places. The next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening is item 10.4.2, entitled Monthly Financial Statements, August 2024, and Carry Forward Budget Adjustments. There's an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended or alternative motions. An absolute majority is required for paragraph 2 of the officer recommendation. Is anyone willing to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Brender-Abrandis, thank you. Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours if you would like to speak.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
And Councillor Waugh hasn't returned to the chamber yet, if we need to note that for minutes. Councillor Coveney, nothing to say? Councillor Brender-Abrandis?
No, nothing further to say, Mr Mayor.
All right. Does anyone wish to speak for or against the officer recommendation? No. In that case, there being no need for Councillor Coveney to wind up, I'll simply put the officer recommendation for the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes on item 10.4.2. And that was unanimous, and Councillor Waugh has rejoined us. So that one's done. Moving on to item 10.5.4, entitled Policy Review. We do have an alternative motion from Councillor Choi. Councillor D'Souza?
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an adjournment, but before I do, just want to clarify with governance that an adjournment of debate is the preferred option as opposed to a deferral for this item.
As Mr Bradford just said, the debate on this item hasn't yet started. It hasn't been moved or seconded. We could defer at this stage. Is that what you'd like to do, or would you specifically want an adjournment for some reason?
Well, I mean, provided that there's no issues in terms of timeframes, I'd like to propose we defer this item to come back at next month's OCM.
Right. I will ask a question at this point. I know we have to do a review of delegations every 12 months, but policies I don't think we have to. There's no reason why a deferral would be problematic? No? Okay. You'd like to defer this item until the next ordinary council meeting? Okay. Is anyone wanting to second that? I saw two hands go up there, Councillor Devard and Councillor Choi. Fire away.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering, could we defer it to a workshop? Because I think there may be some queries around a couple of the policies.
I don't think we can direct the administration to do that as part of a procedural motion, but I have no problem with it administratively. Mr Bradford, Mr Adams?
If it's deferred, we will include discussion on this at one of the workshops we've got scheduled between now and next month's OCM.
That would be great, thank you.
All right. So Councillor D'Souza has moved a deferral of this item until next ordinary council meeting. Councillor Navard seconding. All right. Councillor D'Souza, you are able to speak and give your reasons, but otherwise there is no debate if you'd like to speak and give your reasons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, we've had a massive night tonight regarding the WASP's proposal that's been, at least for myself, and I assume the majority of councillors, the majority of our workload over the past couple of weeks. I haven't been able to give due consideration to this item, so more time I think is in order for us to give valid consideration to this issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Okay, folks, it's a procedural motion to defer until the next ordinary council meeting. That means that there's no further debate on the item. I'll simply put the Councillor D'Souza's motion that we defer until the next ordinary council meeting to the vote. Please cast your votes. And that was carried 7 votes to 1 for the benefit of those listening via YouTube and for the minutes. Those in favour were Councillor Brender-Abrandis, Councillor Choi, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Navard, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Waugh and myself, Mayor Milner. Those against were Councillor Coveney. The item has been deferred until next ordinary council meeting. That concludes item 10. We now move on to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. I haven't received any ahead of the meeting. Does anyone wish to... Councillor Brender-Abrandis?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. If I could apply for a leave of absence from the 23rd of October until the 30th of November inclusive.
Right. 30th of November inclusive? Was that October or November? Sorry.
Yes, so from the 23rd of October until the 30th of November.
Of November, okay. Any other leave of absence applications, folks? No, okay. In that case, I will shortly call for a mover and a seconder that the leave of absence application received from Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis for the period of 23 October 2024 to 30 November 2024 inclusive be granted. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Choi and seconded by Councillor Coveney. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. In that case, I'll declare that carried unanimously. We now move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 12.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis entitled Local Heritage Survey Review, Independent Consultant Review. I have declared a proximity and financial interest in this matter, which means that I will need to leave the room for the duration of the debate and the vote on this item. Under the circumstances, I'll ask Councillor Ward to please take my place as presiding member, and if someone could remember to come and get me once the item's done, that would be very much appreciated. I'll see you all soon.
Right, thank you. We have item 12.1 being a notice of motion from Councillor Brendera-Brandis relating to the Local Heritage Survey Review Independent Consultant Review. Now, I note that we not only have the notice of motion in front of us, but we also have a suggested officer recommendation at page 70. So if somebody could please move one of those motions and let me know which one they intend. Councillor Brendera-Brandis?
Yes, I'll actually just move the notice of motion that I put forward, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brendera-Brandis. Do I have somebody to second that? Councillor Navard. Thank you. Councillor Brendera-Brandis, you may speak to the motion.
Okay. Thank you very much. The notice of motion with regard to Local Heritage Survey Independent Consultant Review is that Council 1 requests the Chief Executive Officer to appoint an independent heritage consultant to review the public nominations received per agenda item 10.3.1 Local Heritage Survey Review, 27th of August 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, during the call for nominations to determine their classification and inclusion in the Local Heritage Survey, and 2, amends the 2024-25 budget to include an allocation of $80,000 for the independent heritage consultant to review and assess the public nominations received for the Local Heritage Survey.
Thank you. Councillor Brendera-Brandis. Councillor Navard, did you wish to speak?
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Sorry, my apologies.
Oh,
Carry on, Councillor Brendera-Brandis.
And thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. The reasons for this change are, firstly, the 28th May 24 Ordinary Council meeting report recommended endorsement of the draft Local Heritage Survey and proposed place records for advertising, but was deferred for another workshop to be facilitated prior to the 27th of August 24 OCM, where the matter was further debated and adjourned until the December 2024 OCM. At the 27 August 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, the administration noted the expectation for me, Councillor Brendera-Brandis, to separately present a notice of motion providing direction for the engagement of an external independent heritage consultant to undertake a review of the new place nominated properties for inclusion in the draft local heritage survey. Community members have invested a significant amount of time nominating properties for consideration and inclusion in the draft local heritage survey, and have also prepared the listed local heritage properties with neighbouring metropolitan local governments. The comparison of the city's draft local heritage listing to neighbouring local governments has raised concerns as to the assessment process and consequently categorisation of nominated properties. Of the 33 new place nominations, only 2 have been identified for a categorisation level 2, and none have been identified for categorisation at a level 1. Prior to the endorsement of the draft local heritage survey, the proposed place records for advertising at the December 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, a review by an accredited heritage consultant should be undertaken to ensure an independent and objective assessment is undertaken to confirm the appropriate categorisation of new place nominations. Prior to the endorsement of the draft local heritage survey, the proposed place records for advertising at the December 2024 Ordinary Council meeting, a review by an accredited heritage consultant should be undertaken to ensure independence and improved governance around the review process for potential properties to be included in the local heritage survey. The review should provide independence as to review methodology, be based on objective criteria and confirm the categorisation appropriateness of the new place nominations. I'm quite aware with the procurement process that may not very well be achieved in December, and that the review process is not necessarily a result that would actually defer the actual advertising that will be taking place. And they're the reasons for this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brendan-Brandis. Councillor Navard, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Councillor Wall. I really was only going to be quite brief about this, and that was to say that because there's been a level of contention and somewhat disappointment, I think it's important that we have not only confidence in the current review process, but that we're also being seen to be doing it correctly. And therefore, I think if this were to go ahead, then it's still pretty good investment for an extra level of transparency. So that's why I'm quite keen to have this happen.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody who wishes to speak against the motion? Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Last week, a motion was passed for Council to allocate $200,000 in the 25-26 budget for concept plans for Coode Street Node 2 at the foreshore. A recommendation that the administration had made themselves several years prior. Councillor Brendan-Brandis' reasoning for voting against the motion was that it was not within the budget cycle and that we've had many workshops around budget time. Now Council's indulgence is sought to allocate a further $80,000 of a budget which has already been set for an exercise our administration has already undertaken. I can't support this motion in good faith. Respectfully, I don't see it as a good use of ratepayers' funds, especially outside the budget cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Does anybody wish to speak for the motion? Oh, yes, Councillor Prendeville, question.
Thank you, Deputy War. Just for some clarification, what has been done so far is we have the group of dwellings that the administration had put together, and that was to go out for advertising. And we have $10,000 in the budget currently for any independent reviews. Can the administration please just clarify if that's correct, and where does the $80,000 come from that's in this notice of motion here?
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So what's happened to date is that the city has undertaken a review of all of the existing places that are currently on the local heritage inventory. And all we've done is we've changed the category of those places to the new terminology. So where they were category B before, they are now category 2, and so on and so forth. The recommendations of those categories were initially prepared by a lady called Kathy Day, who's from Heritage Today. They were then further reviewed in 2017 by Hockey Heritage Studio. So all of the existing places that are on the inventory have been prepared and reviewed by an independent heritage consultant. The city has then undertaken the first step in the process for revising and reviewing the local heritage survey, as it's now known. And what we've done there is we've done the first step, which is the public call for nominations. So members of the public have provided submissions on places that they think should be included in the new survey or amendments to existing place records. We've then reviewed those nominations in accordance with the local heritage survey guidelines and having regard to the existing category of places that have been recommended by the heritage consultant in the last review. So the city has followed the process correctly in preparing the draft. The $10,000 that has been set aside for this process is such that when council resolves to advertise the local heritage survey, if there are any objections received to the categories, we would then use those funds to have a place-specific review by an independent heritage consultant to see whether or not there needs to be a change. And that would give the benefit that the city would be removed from the process in terms of what it's initially recommended and what an independent consultant would then recommend based on the advice received during the submission period. In terms of the $80,000, that would require an absolute majority because the city has not budgeted for that.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Prenderville.
Thank you. Following on from that, if this goes out for advertising and then that's when we receive all of the opinions and sort of thoughts from the community, and then it gets reviewed again, would you advise that maybe if you were to review where those places ended up on the heritage list, we could get an independent review once that's all finalised, once we've got that feedback back from the community?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So this isn't seeking to advertise the draft local heritage survey, so that was deferred until December. What this is seeking to do is to have an independent heritage consultant review the nominations that were received during the initial call for nominations process to determine whether the categories that the city had recommended for inclusion in the local heritage survey were accurate. When council resolves to advertise the draft local heritage survey, there were further objections received to the recommendations that were either put forward by the city or if this goes forward via the heritage consultant, there would still be cause to have a separate consultant review and peer review the heritage consultant's work as to that category. And the reason that that would be important is because otherwise it wouldn't be a separate independent process at that point in time. It would be a case where we have had a consultant prepare something, sent it out, and then double down on what our appointed heritage consultant had recommended despite any submissions received. And we would need to have considered any submissions received and responded accordingly, which is why we've set out to undertake the process in the way we have.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillors, does anybody wish to speak for or against the motion or any further questions? Councillor Choi, are you speaking for or against?
Yeah, speaking for, thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Council has sought and endorsed, as I recall, independent assessments or reviews on many items that have come before Council, and especially where there has been community concern or query as to process transparency and accountability, as I recall there has been here with deputations and questions made on this item when it was last raised. And to me, this is no different here. The City has also said previously that when it comes to the budget and budget allocations, that yes, whilst it's preferable for all expenditure to be accounted for at budget setting time, it is also up to Council if we wish to add something to the budget during the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillor Blake D'Souza, do you wish to speak for or against?
Against. Against. Look, I commend Councillor Brenda Abrandis. I think it's a very nobly intended motion. but I don't think this is really at the core of what we should be focusing on as a council. I think if you ask any ratepayer what are their top 5 issues, heritage wouldn't be in the top 5, or very few would say that. I think if we drop 80k on something like this, where we've had a couple of deputations, I don't think that's a proportionate response. I agree with Councillor Coveney. I don't think this is an appropriate expenditure of ratepayer funds, and therefore I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor De Souza. Does anybody else wish to speak for or against, or any further questions? No? Oh, sorry. I have a couple of questions for Director Shaw, please. I note that the $80,000 that was proposed for an independent heritage consultant to review the draft place records, could you please provide me with the scope of the works that you had anticipated for those costs? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So typically for an independent place review, a Director of Heritage rate is around $300 to $350 an hour. Each individual review would take approximately 5 hours to undertake, and we had 49 nominations submitted through the process. Depending on the complexity of the nomination and whether any further information or research is required, that cost could escalate, and that wouldn't include any reporting time from an independent consultant to provide that advice as well. So yes, it is possible that if this goes forward, if we went out to quotes, that we could receive a lesser figure. However, I would consider that $80,000 would almost be a worst case scenario if we needed to engage a consultant for all 49 submitted nominations.
Thank you, Director Shaw. And just one more. Did you obtain a quote for that figure?
Yes, we did. We sought advice of an independent heritage consultant as to what the figure would be.
Oh, thank you, Director Shaw. And just finally, I note that at the last meeting when this item was discussed, you stated that we had in-house staff who had heritage qualifications. I'd be grateful if you could just detail some of their qualifications and heritage experience.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so we have qualified planners which obviously covers heritage as well, with honours, town and country planning, urban and regional planning, history and geography, and human geography. We're accredited planners with the Planning Institute of Australia and the Royal Town Planning Institute.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
40 odd years between us.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions, or does anybody else wish to speak to this motion? No. Okay, Councillor Brenda Brandis, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The nominations identified 33 properties by the community for inclusion in the protected list as Category 1 or Category 2 places. Of the 33 new place nominations, only 2 have been identified for categorisation Level 2, and none have been identified for categorisation at a Level 1. Prior to the endorsement of the draft Local Heritage Survey, the proposed place records, a review by an accredited heritage consultant should be undertaken to ensure independence and improved governance around the review process for potential properties to be included in the local heritage list. The review should provide independence as to the review methodology, be based on objective criteria, and confirm the categorisation appropriateness of new place nominations. Tonight we've heard that heritage is not a primary concern of the community, and it's probably not in the top 5 categories. I beg to differ with that. The city needs to actually have a better focus with regards to heritage. It's consideration for the streetscape and the preservation of entire sections of this city that need to be given due consideration. We can't dismiss heritage as being out of the top 5 and therefore should be disregarded. We need to make these decisions like we do with trees and consider tree protection as well. They're difficult decisions, but we actually do need to make these. Dr. Brogan, in a deputation on this item, identified a considerable number of properties in the central metropolitan local government that have been categorised as Category 1 and 2. So he referred to the City of Vincent, with 287 listings. City of Bayswater, City of Fremantle with 919 listings. Town of Victoria Park, City of Stirling, City of Subiaco, which is a relatively small local government and has 64 listings. And this is in contrast to the City of South Perth with 46 Category 1 and 2 listed properties. I'm concerned that the Local Heritage Review isn't achieving either the exposure or the community feedback, possibly due to complacency. It is for this reason this motion provides the opportunity for an independent review for good practice to determine and confirm properties that should be given due consideration as Category 1 or 2. Good practice includes the engagement of a qualified, experienced external consultant to determine whether a place meets the threshold for inclusion in the Local Heritage Survey. The use of an external consultant mitigates actual and perceived bias in considering qualifying properties meeting the inclusion threshold and engages a third-party verification to support positions taken by the administration. And this is no different to other processes where we actually do get third parties involved who have got the expertise, including finance. We engage with a finance consultant to walk us through the budget process as well. We have external auditors and internal auditors. An external heritage consultant provides additional assurance and independence to this process. Ideally, the independent consultant would review prior to advertising, and this would ensure a consensus view before further comment or criticism. This motion is focused on delivering an audit assertion of completeness. In other words, have all the properties that have been nominated been given due consideration for appropriate categorisation protection? And this contrasts the alternative motion that is limited with a much narrower focus.
Councillor, you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. The alternative motion only considers landowners that disputed classification or information in the draft place record during advertising the draft Local Heritage Survey. It would be expected the likelihood of landowner disputes would be limited generally to those that are in a protection category, and therefore this assertion is considering the exemption of only those that would be categorised as a 1 or 2. I am concerned that we focus on heritage within the city, but not considering it with regard to suburbs, entire streets or sections of streets collectively and collective heritage value. We should not be focusing purely on one single building as a specimen item for a particular period or type of design for inclusion. We need to actually do considerably more. So whilst heritage is a difficult and contentious subject, it's critical to the history and fabric of the City of South Perth.
That's time, Councillor Brenda Raddis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm going to put this to the vote now, and just noting that this does require an absolute majority. Okay, and that motion has been lost, 4 votes to 3. And those voting for is Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Choi and Councillor Navard, and those against were Councillor Coveney, Councillor De Souza, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Waugh. Thank you. If somebody could please get the Mayor and bring him back. Thank you.
Alrighty, I've just returned to the chamber, and for the benefits of those, that's already been read out? Or not? Ah, good. Okay, excellent. Right, That brings us to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice, and responses to questions from members taken on notice at the August 2024 Ordinary Council meeting can be found in the appendix of this agenda. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Any questions from members for the administration? Councillor Choi.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I noticed there's cameras in the room, so I'm just wondering if the cameras are now operational or if we're waiting till January to switch them on. And if there are any notice requirements if they are operational for people who make deputations and questions. I think I did read something about that.
Ms Fry?
So we're hoping to go live with the cameras in October for the October meeting. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Fry. Any further questions for the administration this evening, councillors? No. Okay. That brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil for this evening. Item 15 is when we would close the meeting to the public if there was any need to do so, but there's not, so we won't. And that brings us to item 16. So before I close tonight's meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare this meeting closed at 9:21 p.m. Thank you all and good night.